So welcome everybody to this transdisciplinary seminar, The Power of Play Co-Designing with Children Landscapes of Changes. It's a seminar, my name is Laura Cipriani, for those who do not know me. I work in the section of landscape architecture. I'm mostly dealing with landscapes in relation to climate change. I will tell you how this seminar started and why we are here today. Today is the first day of class of Ecumenius course, which is a kind of special course for teaching innovation. And teaching innovations, this started 1 year ago with this tender that came out, was awarded by this little grant, which will give the possibility to explore pedagogical innovations, especially in landscape. And the title was Climate Changes Again, Co-Designing with Children the Landscapes of the Future. It was coming from the recognition that today's new generations, and in particular children, will face many consistent landscape changes in their lifetime. So their lifetime will be, they are going to address the climate change issues. So how can we involve somewhat younger generations in projecting a different future? How can we make them aware of what can come with climate change, but also to think about this concept in a positive attitude, because the invitation is to act collectively to save our planet Earth, starting from landscape, from nature, and have somewhat an emotional knowledge in contact with nature to tackle the climate transition. And this is actually crucial for trying to have a different perspective. But not necessarily climate change has to be negative, but maybe we can tackle it in a different way. So I will try to give a brief introduction on the concept of play, and that's why play is so much important, especially in the landscape discipline, and probably how play is not a new topic in the landscape discipline, but has been on the ground since a very long time. And I will also try to give a little introduction on some pedagogists who try to embed this concept of nature, of landscape, with children in their teaching methodology. So if we look at play, play can be considered a play, or play is a game or a game. There is a big difference because play is something that is spontaneous. It comes spontaneously. There's no purpose in playing things. And I really like the etymology because play also is considered like a dance. So there is this idea of an artistic component of play. If we think about game instead, it's actually very organized. It does contain the idea of a rule, of something stiff. Or maybe sometimes you have a competition. You think about a game that does have a competition. So there is a more organized system where you have the idea that the game has a more scientific somewhat approach. Whereas, like we said, plays has this nice attitude of dancing, of thinking, of being together, of finding an harmonic way of approaching the landscape. And when you go through the terms of play in the words and items, most of these words are coming from the theater, from music. So they are very much linked with this idea of dancing and trying to find an artistic way of dealing with a special environment. When we think about play, we immediately think about men, and in particular children, the homo ludens, where everybody has a playful attitude. But in nature, also animals are playing. And over here you see two kangaroos that are actually working together and playing and learning from each other. And even in nature, actually play is a dance. These were some young flowers, sunflowers, at the beginning of a stage of life, and they were actually moving to find their own space like a dance. So they were trying to test the special environment. So men, but animals and nature and plants are actually dancing and playing at the beginning of their life. When we think about play, play is an action, but then we have a place. So what is actually important, and you see this Peter Bruegel children's game, is not only the 90 games that are shown here, but the landscape in the background. You see up the top the landscape, and also you see the city. So the special environment where we are working is actually crucial in defining that special environment. In the landscape discipline, there was a landscape architect, very famous in our discipline, who is Carl Theodor Sorensen, who made this interesting garden. In this case, a geometrical garden made up of playful elementary forms, someone to play with the gardening. What is probably little known is that at the beginning of his career, at the end of the Second World War, he started thinking that children actually should have somewhat a giant playground, which is simply a place, a landscape, where they have to be space and work with it and destroy it, and to be completely anti-aesthetics. But they can test, they can test on the ground, they can test on a landscape that is not planned in any form. There is also a famous American Japanese sculpture that usually is named in landscape architecture as well, Isamu Nobuki. And he actually is one of the first promoter of the idea of the non-directed play somewhat. So play can happen even in forms like this, in landscape like this, which are completely surreal, abstract. And so the child can interpret this landscape and make his own place without any kind of direction. So there is this freedom of working in the space. We are in the Netherlands, and most of you know Aldo van Eyck. Aldo van Eyck, at the end of the Second World War, he tried to manage in the city of Amsterdam places which are completely bombed. And he made these playgrounds. What is actually interesting in his work is that he worked on a city level. So he made more than 800 playgrounds with places which were completely abandoned, and he tried to connect them. So to work at a city level eye is something that we can think about in landscape. And in our discipline, and in the urban discipline, the idea of game is actually very much linked not only to children, but also as a playful attitude in exploring the space. These are the situationists, the board, the naked cities. We are in the middle of the 50s. And it was the idea of exploring the city with a kind of psychogeography, so being driven by the elements of the city. And this led to some important and very well-known utopias, like this one by Constant, The New Babylon, where they were thinking that the man would be the homo ludens, so somebody who was not working anymore and could actually play into the special environment. And there are many people in those years, in the 60s, also having this kind of playful attitude, even in the body, in exploring the landscape and understanding the special conditions of the space. What is actually crucial is also to find out that in pedagogy, there are a lot of pedagogists that worked on somewhat in playing the landscape. And one of these is Comenius, the ones that is sponsoring this grant and this course. Comenius was a Czech educator. He published widely, especially in this Didactica Opera Omnia. And he made very interesting books, like this one, which is the Orbis Sensarium Pictus. For the first time, he started talking about pedagogy that is driven by knowledge, and this knowledge is given from nature and nature from God. So there is this, what he calls pansophilia, this knowledge that comes from nature and from the spiritual parts of nature that are deeply connected with God. And what is also interesting that in this book, for the first time, you find, this kind of first children picture book. For now, it's normal, whereas at most times, this is the first time that you find the drawings for the children, and you see all these letters and this alphabet. What he says is, let it be given to children into their hands to delight themselves withal as they please, with the sight of the pictures. So the senses are the ones that are very strictly linked with the child's experience. In a second book, which is entitled The Labyrinth of the World and Paradise of the Earth, we are in 1631, he imagines that the city and the spatial environment is a labyrinth, it's a game, it's a play, where everybody has to find his own way, not only children, but each of us. A second person that is crucial for sure is Maria Montessori. Most of you know her. Maria Montessori is an Italian pedagogist. She published this interesting book, The Discovery of the Child, and she was envisioning education as a cosmic education, where the natural component were part of this education. This is a diagram that shows her idea of pedagogy, and if you see that, the ecological view is actually part of this system. So ecology is crucial in the understanding of the spatial environment. And she was teaching to children to go outside. Here we are in the house of the child in Rome, and these children are actually working outside because there is a learning process that comes, to cultivate the land and to be in the outdoors. A third person I would like to mention is Colin Ward. Colin Ward is an urbanist. He worked especially in the 70s, 80s, 90s. He published two main works. One is The Child in the City, and the second one is The Child in the Country. What he tries to vehiculate as an idea is that the gaze that we should adopt in understanding the city environment is the one of the child, the view from the floorscape, from the ground, which is very helpful in understanding major concepts on how this place, how cities are built. And in the second book, in The Child in the Country, he actually says that the child in the country does have a deeper knowledge of the environment, and mainly because he is exposed much more to the natural component. The younger the child, the closer his eye level is to the ground, and this is the reasons why the floorscape is much more significant for a child. So even a floorscape in a city has to be planned. Another person I would like to mention is Bruno Munari. Bruno Munari was an Italian designer that at the end of his life, he worked widely with children and published many books with them. He works, these are some of the books, but really it's a huge list, Drawing a Tree, Drawing in the Sun, Roses in the Salad. He tried to link the idea that the children can build on imagination, and imagination that is related to nature. This is a sample, Roses in the Salad. He took some salad and chopped it, and he put the stamps of the chopped salad with the color, and immediately this becomes something else. It becomes an imaginary island, or something that we can explore with imagination. Another work that I would like to mention is Jeu, which means a game by Bernard Lassus. For those who are landscape architects, Bernard Lassus is a very well-known French landscape architect. And he tried to work mostly on the idea of game through imagination. He proposed, for example, in this exhibition, a simple paper with a red dot inside. And he asked the people to draw a landscape, to draw a space. And you see that all these imaginary dots became something else. And the imagination of each of us shaped different landscapes. And they were also exhibited. When we talk about pedagogies and in architecture, in landscape, there are many radical pedagogies that try to involve different disciplines together. This is, for example, the Institute of Architecture Valparaiso, who experimented from the 50s and the 70s, different forms of play with theater, poetry, architecture, environment. And this was done also by other people like Roles Alfrin, who was a landscape architect, an American landscape architect in the 60s and 70s, including the possibility of gaming in the landscape outdoor, or by Kulik. This is a game of Morel Hill. So there is the idea that pedagogies can include the different ways of exploring the special, the space, and how actually the space can become a game somewhat. What are we going to do with the Comenius course? The course deals with climate change as a game. We're going to have 9 students, some of them are sitting here, plus 1 student assistant that is going part of this course. And as you see, they're coming from this faculty, but from different disciplines. So it means landscape architecture, urban design, which are somewhat relatives, but they are not the same. Plus, we are going to have 23 children from Voorburg, from Royal Van Priesten. They are going to be 10, 12 years old in this Comenius course, and then they're going to be the 2 teachers of the primary and tertiary school, plus also the parents will be involved in this process. We will work on climate change, but we will pick up one peculiar gaze, and the gaze will be the one of water and soil, which do play a crucial role in the climate picture. Think about the soil, not only think about the soil, but it's more carbon is stored in the soil rather than in the atmosphere or in the vegetation. So it's actually a very close look on that. So we will have a scientific approach and together an artistic approach. So there is a knowledge that is scientific, but then this knowledge has to be an emotional knowledge in contact with nature to tackle the climate transition. We are going to have mainly 3 parts, and this course is going to be divided into 3 parts. One is going to be reading and playing the landscape. The second one with a workshop outdoor, and then co-designing the landscape with an indoor co-design workshop with children. And finally, the third one will be through creating the landscape with an on-site dissemination event. So the first one, exploring and playing, reading the landscape, will be set up here in Delft. We'll be working in a site that is not far from the university, and it's contains called Delft Hout, with a lake and a forest and some rural areas. It's an interesting place because in the past it was actually dealing with peat excavation, that peat was used for energy purposes. And peat was storing a lot of carbon dioxide. So it's a nice place. Plus, we are going to deal with this biodynamic farming, which is present there, and they are very nicely already aware of what are the problems of the areas. But then we're going to have temporary place at the very beginning. So we have a scientific knowledge of the site, and we will go also with the artistic approach. And this artistic approach will always be linked with the scientific approach, knowing, for example, the soil, knowing and testing the soil. These are some soil tests. They seem to be artistic, despite the fact there is a lot of knowledge in exploring these spots. And then also think about mud painting, or maybe the knowledge of the vegetation that will be there, that will be the starting point of making children aware of what is there and knowing the barks, for example, and understanding what is the vegetation. In this phase, we will also propose, of course, a landscape plan. So we will go up in scale, trying to put together all these elements in a bigger plan. This is, for example, a work done by T. Frank in Girona, who worked in the whole city of Girona with a simple idea, cutting the grass. Just simply cutting the grass. He made this artistic component, and he was able to work in that with many little elements, artistic elements that were done in the landscape view. The second part will be dealing with co-designing landscape climate changes. What do we mean with co-design? We are going to work with children, but also university students, with the teachers are co-designers, and also think about that nature will be also the other co-designer. And this is a trend that is actually very typical in the landscape process. We will have this kind of co-design practices in an imperfect way. We will not be perfect, but we try actually to collaborate for this climate puzzle continuously and find a way in which, with some sketches and models, being able to select somewhat what we would like to do with the landscape. Third phase, we are going to be on site, and we are going to co-create this landscape. We invited the children, we invited the parents, and hopefully they will also come during these months. And we will start doing something and being on site, being open to the power of ideas that will come out from this process, creating possibilities. Save the date. 19th of June, we will have the first installation and dissemination outside event in Delft. A second group of children will come out that day to test the climate games that were planned by other children. So we'll have a double test from children who never been experienced this installation before. And the 24th of June, in the Berlage room, in this room, we are going to present the final presentation of the first results. We start today with this conference seminar. I really thank for the speaker that came throughout the world, really. We are going to have 4 presentations, plus a roundtable at the end in the morning. Then we are going to have lunch right here, and we will have 2 other presentations and a roundtable, and we will finish with some readings. So first, we start with Valerio Perna, who will be online, and he will talk about playful activity as a design strategy, rules and freedoms for a play grammar. The second intervention will be done by Alison Goss, who will try to see who is the child in nature, ideas and theories to work with. So we will take educational perspectives. The third intervention will be done by Mathieu Gillen. He is an expert in co-designing with children, and he's coming from industrial design, and he's telling us the story of co-designing the outdoors with children and how actually we can work with them. The fourth lecture will be done by Roberto Pasini from the University of Bologna. He is an architect and a landscape architect, and he's going to have this presentation on Monterey, on this playing becoming an animal. So the idea of the embodiment of being an animal in the landscape for biodiversity loss. In the afternoon, we will have Marie-Laure Desjampons, who is a lawyer from the Council of Europe. She worked on the Landscape Education Convention, and in particular, she will present a pedagogical booklet that was done for primary schools. And finally, we will end with a landscape architect, Belinda Tato from Ecosistema Urbano. She is going to present a project on dreaming the future that was done in the Bahamas, where the children are trying to give them their dreams, and these dreams became somewhat an installation. So let me finish with this quote before we go to Valerio Perna. Every child is an artist. The problem is how to remain an artist once we grow up. At the end, over there in that table, you will find this paper with a green dot this time. It's a Bernard Lassus idea that will be reconverted somewhat in something different, because I kindly ask you to make a drawing of climate change and landscape topic and to include this red dot inside your drawing. We will collect them afterwards during the lunchtime. So thank you for being here, and now we start with the first presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Laura.
I was going to introduce you the first presentation. Valerio Perna is from the University of Polis. He's going to be online today. He's an architect and also a PhD in architecture. He's currently employed at Polis University in Tirana, where he's leading the Innovation Factory coordinator and head of the Research Center of Information and Resources. His research agenda explores the role of playfulness and ludic processes in contemporary architectural practices to address the complexity and behavioral phenomena in the urban fabric. He's going to have a presentation whose title is Playful Activity as a Design Strategy. Thank you, Valerio, for being with us.
Thanks, Laura, for the introduction. Let me share my slides so you will confirm me that they... Do you see my screen?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so I will start. First of all, thanks for the invitation. Many topics, many projects that I also used in my research. So it's a pleasure to be with you, not physically, sorry, but it was impossible for me to be there. But thanks for the invitation in this nice activity. So my presentation will be about playful activity as a design strategy, roots and freedom for a playground. I'm an architect. I work in Albania at Polis University, and I'm the coordinator of the Innovation Factory, which is a think tank where we try to put together different problems that we have in the urban fabric in Albania, try to tackle these problems with different strategies. And game and playfulness, most of all, is one of the ways that we try to deal with these problematics. And the presentation today will be focused on my main research during my PhD. I did my PhD in Rome, but I was also in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam for 1 year as a visiting scholar to deepen my topic that was ludic activity as a design strategy. And the main question was what play is, you know, being an architect and doing a PhD about games and architecture, especially in Italy, you are always the strange guy in the department, you know, so everyone says, okay, is the strange guy working on games, playfulness, what does it mean, can we use it in architecture? So the first thing that I did in my research was trying to define what play is, and especially how play can be used in architecture under many different forms. We can talk about creativity, we can talk about design, we can deal with climate change, resiliency. So the idea was, first of all, for me to find the definition and to see how was it possible to create a city that was actually somehow shaped and infected by games. So if you ask to me, how can a city made by play could be, I imagine the image on the right. This is a graphic design from Eric Wong, and I always imagine the city, you know, like a system of pieces that are actually connected together and created this kind of very deep, or very diverse, but at the same time, you know, with this kind of compositional attitude, many different pieces that actually time by time they join together in order to create the city. And of course, you already showed this picture. This is one of the pictures that I like the most. Children's play. This is like more than 80 different games that actually show us how the city is not just about buildings, is not just about streets, but it's about the activity that you perform. And the cities can have a different meaning. They can have actually, a different point of view from meaningful activities like game can be. And talking about the attitude of this research, I had to be a player again. Picasso said different part is about keeping the childhood inside us. So I started to have this kind of attitude that also Bruno Munari suggested. Keeping the spirit of childhood within yourself for your whole life means preserving the curiosity to know, the pleasure of understanding, and the desire to communicate. So this was the way, more or less, that as an architect, I try to deal with playfulness in the urban environment. This is the structure of the research. Today, I will talk a little bit here and there about the different chapters and about the different way that play can be actually intersected with architecture. The first part was about play and its roots. As I said, the most important part for me was not just to find projects that can actually justify my research, but also, coming to a definition of game, of play that can actually could link to architecture and architectural design. So I started very, very, very back in time. I started from, games that are actually being always a part of human life, talking about political, talking about societal challenges. So we can see, the way that actually in the ancient Egypt, Senate is one of the most ancient game, was actually, an old version of chesses that, Queen Nefertari used to play within the court. The second one is the potluck. Potluck is a very interesting game, was made by American Indians. It was a competitive game that, they used to make among tribes. So to show the power of their tribes, they actually used to prepare gifts for another tribe, and the more expensive they were, the more your tribe was considered rich. And it's interesting because besides of being a competitive games, sometimes, many tribes, according to some scholars or some researchers that were actually Western researchers that went to visit the Indian Americans, many tribes actually disappear from this kind of, spending so much energy, spending so much money, so much wealthness in order to win this kind of game. And then, many different forms. I started to see how many different forms can we actually find in the intersection between play and architecture. You talk about the Naked City from situationism. Aldo Van Eyck, of course, was one of my main influences. The idea of a playground which is different from the contemporary playgrounds that we're used to. Here, the child is free to play, his child to give a meaning to the space. It's not that kind of playground that we see today with the pink elephant, where everything is predefined and there is no space for freedom and there is no place for a playful attitude to the urban space. And then, of course, video games, no? SimCity, every one of us which is actually into architecture and game, I think, has played SimCity once in his life. And then the other part was also to understand how games could be a method in order to deal with complexity in urban system. And many of the topics that I took from the game theory, John Conway way of life, was a way that I actually used also here in Albania in order to lower tension between the urban environment and the citizen. And in the end, what is a game? For me, it was very important in architecture to link my research with this definition from Bernard Suits and his book, The Grasshopper. And a game has to have a pre-game objective, the goal to be achieved, we can also be described in terms external to the game itself, a set of rules that has to be, that has to be followed in order to have the magic of the game happens, and a playful attitude in which we stick to the rules and not indulge in behaviors that will break the spell of the game. Starting from this, the idea was then, okay, can I now find some way to link the architects with the game and to see many different works from architects in which games and playfulness can be seen as a sort of matrix, as a sort of driving force that they used, even though maybe not in a very explicit way, but also in an implicit way, in order to justify their work and their goals. So the idea is that games in architecture can develop a kind of lateral thinking. This is an image from the Bono of the idea of the lateral thinking, and games can improve control, can improve creativity, positiveness, and also help us to deal with a kind of negative attitude that sometimes during the projects can happen. And I will show you now some project dealing with urban fabric and the urban landscape when a gamified and playful system is developed. This is a project in Germany, in Hamburg, finding places. And the idea is, how can we relocate the thousands of migrants that are coming to Hamburg? How can we find a better solution that can be good, not just for the people coming, but also for the citizen that will, create connection with them. And this is a board game, actually. This is a digital board game in which every Lego that you see is put on the board, and the board is linked with a system of big data where if you put it in a specific zone, you will find, for example, how many people are living there, how much abandoned buildings you have, how much possibility you have, for public services and for these people to integrate. The idea was not just to put people in gyms or in not used school, but the idea was to put them among the people living there in order to create stronger connection. And this is the board, and the whole part of the city of Hamburg was created digitally in order to achieve this kind of gamified board game. Another idea to board game in architecture comes from a direct experience. This is the way that I actually, use games for creativity with my students. The students, they actually create more devices, small artifacts, which are game artifact in which they start from an existing work from one of the masters of architecture, and then they design it as a game. The idea is that they cannot just reproduce the original work from the architect, but they also create a huge amount of pieces that can actually be used in order to create their design. And this is a part of the research where actually famous architects have been influenced by games. Frank Lloyd Wright, for example, said, I was a huge player of 3 billion games, and you can see actually that there are some reconstruction of his works that actually have a resemblance with these adult works. And then we also have a piece of the Netherlands, because this tale was influenced somehow from Mobago. Mobago was an old game in order to recreate a traditional Dutch house, which was, that was based on this kind of bidimensional planes that were actually linked together. And we can see, a kind of resemblance also of this idea within then the style architecture. And games can also be used. Some architects use also games in order to lower conflict in the urban environment. This is a Play the City project, which is a Dutch-based studio, and they actually use board games in order to redesign the landscape and the urban fabric with local communities. This is a project that was made in Turkey. I don't know if you've ever been to Turkey, but there are lots of problems of informality that links to conflict in urban space, and also with a system of building which is not sustainable at all. So they created these big games in which every time there are different roles. Municipality once plays in its own role, then it goes to play as an NGO, then as a citizen community, in order for everyone to understand which is the best possibility to deal with a co-design space in the urban environment. This is another project. This is a very interesting one. This is from Fields of View from Bangalore. And here you have a problem. On the left, you can see the urban landscape of a typical slum from India and what they do. In India, you have, especially on the outskirts of town, you have a kind of pastoral society. So, the main problem there is to divide the land. And they actually create a gamified system where they can actually help people to solve the conflicts in the division of the land that they were used for their pastoral use. And it's a very low-tech system. It's like, you know, some kind of textile, just some kind of wooden blocks, but this is a way that they try to put different people together in order to design the space where they will actually live and work, of course. And talking about Lorenz Solpring, you know, and talking about landscape design, Lorenz Solpring, I really like this project where he actually simulates through music the movement of people along the space and along the urban fabric. And this kind of system, which is called motation, is one of the ways that he actually, you know, designed the urban landscape, starting from this idea of playfulness and this idea of really moving among the space where the function, they are not defined strictly, but everyone is free to find its own space and find its own way of using the environment. And games can be used also, you know, also to in a digital way. This is a game that we did when I was in Amsterdam with a colleague from South Africa. In 2018, we actually noticed about a water crisis in Cape Town, and we developed this kind of alternate reality game. This is an interactive narrative game that we use, you know, with our students in order to sensibilize people among these problems. So if you play this game, you can actually have a character, a persona that will have some specific traits, and you will play dealing with people, interacting, and somehow you get a knowledge about the water crisis happening. And on the other side, you can actually help developing some design strategies to tackle the crisis. And then, you know, designing with game, I'm not just, you know, a researcher, but I also teach. And the idea is, how can I give my students some keywords? How can I give my students some categories in order to help them through design, through the use of game, and through the use of playfulness and freedom in the urban environment. This is some of the categories that I propose: losing the boundaries, populating the void, elevating the play, opening the process, and stitching the terrain bag of our cities. And among the projects that can actually, you know, justify this kind of methodology, I usually show this project from Elemental, which is the studio from Alejandro Aravena. This is a park, the Children's Bicentennial Park, and the very interesting thing regarding this park is the limit. As you can see, the whole limit of the park is not a tough one. It's a ludic infrastructure where you have slopes, you have different games that the children can use, and you have transparency. So the city is not divided from the park. The city has a direct contact with the park, and the people are actually, you know, leaving also the limit of the park that we are used to have with normal fence, but all the limit of the park is a ludic infrastructure. And then, you know, there is this beautiful project from Maider Lopez. This is from a Biennale in Sharjah. Oh, sorry, I closed the. Let me just check it. This is a project from in Sharjah, in close to Dubai, and this is a football field that was made in an existing urban environment. As you can see, you know, there are lamps that they were pre-existing in the area, but they actually activate this kind of courtyard that was a parking spot, just designing 4-7 lines, red lines, and transforming it into a football yard. And then there is a project by an Italian studio, which is called MAO, which is called Continuity City. This is a project that is linked to the idea of continuity in the urban environment through urban space. The studio created a kind of game, a kind of board game, where you have different colors, and every color is linked to empty spaces, green spaces, and the building. The idea was to have this kind of textile work in the city in order to create continuous spaces where the green spaces were actually the continuation and the communication system in the city. And the last part is about some personal experience that I did not just in Albania, but also in Italy. The first idea is, how can we use game in order to reactivate urban voids within the urban environment. This is a project that we did in Sicily. This is the city of Gioiosa Marea, and we were asked by the municipality to build a structure that could actually reactivate a beautiful spot close to the sea that was used as a parking spot. And in the end, we developed this parametric computational design structure that is a sonorous environment. We actually found a way to transform this structure to some Arduino boards into a musical instrument. So touching the bars that you have here, you have different instruments, and you can have 7, 8 people depending on the number of Arduino boards that you actually connect to the structure that can actually play as different musical instruments. And children, of course, we had many visitors, but children were some of the most excited one. They actually, the structure was there for a couple of days, and they told us, why are you going to put it down? Can we actually leave it here? But it was quite difficult also for system of permission and so on. But for 2 or 3 days, the structure was visited by many children that they actually composed some collective melodies in the environment. The other project was about designing for introvert people. This is a prototype that we developed when I was a business scholar at the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences. It started from a class that we used to have with an Italian colleague, and as you know, Italians speak a lot. So we actually used to make many questions to the students, what do you think about that? But what are you doing with your design? And after one class, a very good students came to us and told us, I'm an introvert person. I think I'm a really good designer, and she actually was, but can you please avoid to make me so many questions when we are in class, because I'm not so comfy in replying. So first of all, we said to ourselves, are we making some mistakes? Are we actually forcing the student to do something that they're not keen on doing? And then we decided to work a little bit with the class about the concept of introversion. The idea is that a designer, an architect, should be an extrovert. So if you are an introvert, maybe you are not able to present your projects in the right way, and maybe you will not have the recognition that you deserve. But we actually studying some psychologies and researches, we actually saw that introversion is just a trait of personality, and how can we actually push people to understand this and not see introvert people in a negative way or thinking that they are something less than extrovert designer. We build this kind of prototypes. They are called the introbots, and they have very different personality. They have an Arduino board on the top, and they have some light sensors on the eyes, and the light that you can do with your torch or the light that you can do with your mobile phone is a stimuli that actually simulate human interaction. So if you play with them, the more you actually point the light on their eyes, the more you are simulating the social stimuli. And the more you do it, the more they will escape in order to find dark places. At the same time, we had an invitation from the School of Children, from the School of Architecture for Children in Sicily, in Favara. This is a very nice reality. And they told us to make a workshop about designing an urban playground and an urban park in the city. And we decided to work with the children on the topic of introversion. So the workshop was, how can we design an urban playground for an introvert children? We went there, we made some gaming session with the students. In the beginning, they didn't know at all about the topic of introversion. We actually made a nurturing system of lesson in order to explain them slowly what introversion is. They played with the introbots in order to actually understand how some features of an introvert person could be and how to design a playground for them. And this is one of the results. It's a very low-tech solution, but the idea of this girl was that the introbots need within the park a kind of private spot where they could recharge themselves after interacting with many people. And you can see one which is like playing on top, another one which is quite isolated for some minutes in order to find again a kind of balance in his introversion in order to be out and playing again in the playground. And the last idea is about the teaching work that I do in Albania. I teach architectural design and technology, and we always try with the students to work on some crisis in the urban environment. This is one of the river of Tirana. This is the Tirana River on the northern part of the city, and we actually work with the students in an incremental design way. So together with the colleagues, we propose to the students 15 areas on the river that they actually could use for their project. The idea is that the students, they do not have to use just the areas that we propose to them, but they can actually negotiate with us to add many areas on the river. So in the end, we have at least 25, 30 areas that are negotiated with the students, and the projects are very different. We just tell them, the students, that the crises that they have to face, they are about, climate changing, pollution, conflict in urban environment, and they actually propose their own project in the area. We usually use the project for 4 or 5 years in order to have an incremental design attitude, that the project, it doesn't come top down. So we tell the students what the project will be, but it actually is a bottom-up process where the students, they define the boundaries and the rules of their own games. We have different keywords that they can use: playfulness, spatial intelligence, multifunctionality, proactivity, civic engagement. And in the end, we have different assignments when the students starts from opening a blog. Sorry for the Italian language, but these are actually from the research. So they actually open a blog when they can start, talking also with the communities and with the people. They map the urban space, thinking about the different peculiarities of each different area that we propose to them, and also to find a different way or different areas to be added. And they also work on we also have an assignment which is called the self-portrait. So the students use also a moment to do a self-portrait of themselves related to the crisis that they're actually trying to tackle in the area, to reflect a little bit more of the incidents that their project could have in the riverside. And then, in the end, they actually do this kind of small intervention. They are playful installation, they are small pavilions or small landscape intervention, when they actually try to mix together urban technologies and ICT with playfulness and freedom to use the spaces around the river. These are some of the students that this was my first year in Albania, and they were the trigger for me in order to develop this research. And everything that can be found on this topic is on my monography that was published in 2020, and which is a small portion of the thesis where I actually talk about the most divulgative part of the research. So as every game, also this presentation ends with a game over. And I would like to thank you for your attention, and I hope it was interesting for the public. Thank you.
The audio for your presentation. He actually showed the book, but unfortunately it's in Italian, and however, he's describing many of his games gamification rather than playfulness, I would say, as a method and a grammar of play in his book. We come with the presentation of Alison Koss. She's going to have a presentation on who is the child in nature, ideas and theories to work with. Alison has a master in education in Montessori education and a master degree and a PhD in education. The research focused on special reasoning and mathematics education. She worked as a Montessori teacher and head of school. Alison is at the moment also a consultant in Montessori mathematics education, especially now. So thank you for being with us and giving us a different games.
Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure and honor to be here, and I want to thank Laura for the invitation. This is a very exciting project. The photographs in this presentation were taken at the rail path in Toronto, Canada, and the path was built on old railway tracks which in turn were built on indigenous pathways used by local people. It's currently under renovation. One of the questions the Comenius project asks is whether we can involve children in co-designing the landscape and whether new educational methods may be developed. This presentation considered briefly what educational methods that already exist that may be considered add legitimacy to children's endeavors in this project. Then, working on the premise that these exist, I look at pedagogical ideas worthy of consideration when reframing or redesigning educational methodologies. Ideas about the child and nature have evolved over time. Jean-Jacques Rousseau held an idea about a natural child, born good, developing freely outside in nature, but once exposed to society, was exposed to corruption and greed. The idea of nature as something separate from society exists today as a place where you can escape the confusion of the world. For instance, in the writings of Love, he talks about a nature deficit for children. Vygotsky, the Russian psychologist, however, rather than dichotomizing nature and society, saw that it as both biological and cultural, and felt that development could only take place in a social setting. Other theories, such as embodied cognition and sensuous cognition, also entwine individuals within a corporeal and symbolic culture that is not separate from nature. Montessori, in common with Dewey and others, believed in development taking place through the senses. But they incorporated this understanding within a broader definition of the role of education, which is to prepare the child for a contributing life in a democratic society. Montessori designed a comprehensive curriculum for the primary child, as Laura mentioned, called Cosmic Education. At a Montessori conference recently, last weekend in Delft, Erica Moretti, a historian, called sorry, how do I get down this a bit? My text is run out. I'm not sure how to get it down. Erica Moretti, a historian from Brown University, called Cosmic Education a place where children could develop the critical thinking, imagination, and skills required to actively become agents. Also speaking at the Montessori conference was Ariane Walls, a UNESCO head and chair of transformative learning for socio-economical sustainability at Wageningen University. Much of what he proposed for education is found in Montessori, such as situated learning, citizen science, place-based, value-based learning. Children's development has also been considered an apprenticeship. Barbara Rogoff, an American psychologist, saw children's development as taking place in the path of adults, where they learn the skills to solve the problems of the time using available resources. And Jean Lave, a cognitive anthropologist, and Etienne Wenger, an educational theorist, suggest that children's development can be understood as situated learning, where learning is an integral aspect of social practice. Children, according to these theories of development, are legitimate participants in society, and as such, they can be positioned as taking an important role in designing for mitigating climate changes in the landscape. In the second part of the discussion, I have a brief look at the focus on pedagogical concepts about children's learning and development that may be considered valuable in consideration. The section also discusses ideas about the role of the adult in learning. According to Vygotsky, the Russian psychologist, the development of concept requires that the child is able to pay attention for sustained periods of time. The circumstances that foster attention and engagement are generally found in play, and one of the hallmarks of play is the autonomy that it affords the child. Play and learning, however, are concepts that are dichotomized, and a definition of play is elusive. The children's activities in a Montessori classroom have often been termed play, but she preferred the term work because she felt this afforded the children the respect they deserved for the endeavors they were making in the environment. Some have called it guided play. In guided play, the adult develops meaningful activities that are challenging and engaging for the child, and the children are supported by the adult through conferences, through observations, through discussions. In Montessori pedagogy, a child is free to choose an activity that's already been chosen. They're free to work for as long as they want, even if it's for weeks on an activity at a time, free to choose who they will work with, and free to end their activity when they decide. This autonomy is a prerequisite for developing in children critical thinkers to become independent workers. I bring up the subject of spatial reasoning because this was my area of my PhD, and it's an area that's often overlooked because it's a non-verbal type of reasoning, and so it's hard to assess when observing young children. But spatial reasoning involves making sense of objects in space and making sense of yourself in relation to objects in space. Considering the importance of spatial reasoning, opportunities for children to use their spatial reasoning are limited in the classroom. And this is often because it's not considered very much, and adults do not necessarily understand the importance of spatial reasoning and movement. And there may be a lack of appreciation for these skills, a lack of challenging real-world objects to work with, or places to move and explore. The development of spatial reasoning skills is best addressed with goal-directed activities with the use of objects, where the children can use their fine motor skills and their gross motor skills. A deep understanding of children's spatial development could be considered an important part of the Comenius project, considering the wealth of opportunities that this will afford the children. A prepared environment, this is very much a Montessori concept. Recalling that learning takes place in a social setting, it's important that the environment offers opportunities for socialization. In a Montessori setting, there are mixed age groups of 3 years. This allows the younger children to observe the older children, and they're much more interested in what the older children are doing than in what the adult is doing. It also gives the older children an opportunity to model leadership behavior for the younger children and to see how well they have understood a concept when they try and explain it to a younger child. It's mutually beneficial. Mixed age groupings are reflective of society's makeup, and it gets rid of competition and rather fosters mutual support and engagement. The prepared environment does not need to be a classroom. When I was at the same Montessori conference here in Delft a couple of weeks ago, we heard about the first nomadic Montessori school with the Samburu tribe in Kenya. And there the teacher, the adult, didn't have a classroom set up, but followed the children where they were and taught using the materials that that were part of the children's daily life, which is what you would call situated learning. We also heard about Montessori taking place in a women's prison in Mexico, where the Montessori instructor worked with the children of the woman in prison. And it's not limited to age either. We heard about a project in Australia where Montessori was being implemented for people with dementia in an old age home. Time to process. Allowing uninterrupted time for learning and for developing deep understanding is essential. Interruptions damage children's engagement, and it's hard for them to re-engage. Montessori suggested an extended period of at least 3 hours of uninterrupted time, where the teacher would not interrupt the child, nor other children were allowed to interrupt the child. Ideally, it would be a longer length of time. Learning is not considered linear, but rather spiral, where concepts introduced and more concepts are introduced onto that, and children work at their own pace, seeing what interests them. The children also have an extended period of time within the classroom. Most classrooms run for 3 years, which is a minimum, but some are for 6 years. And where I conducted my research, the class spanned 6 years of children. So it's a very extended period of time where deep relationships are developed. The extended period of time also fosters trust. The role of the adult, and I say the adult and not the teacher because it can be anyone in this role, right? It's an important role. The environment needs to be prepared. That's one of the adult's responsibilities, and maintained. So there's the physical environment, but there's also the socio-cultural environment, which is the language, the terminology, the agreed on behavior, the community values that need to be established. The adult's role is to model this behavior, this desired behavior, and to observe. The Montessori method has often been called a method of observation. The curriculum does not drive the teaching, as in most schools. Observation drives the teaching. So the teacher observes individual children to see if they're engaged with materials. If they're not using material, why not? Teacher needs to reflect on this, then try and introduce a different material until a child is finally engaged in their work. Another important thing is terminology. In traditional schools, assessment is usually based on the children's verbal responses, but young children often don't have the terminology or the vocabulary to explain what they know. In my research on spatial reasoning, most of my analysis was done observing the children's movements. And I obviously went over my material over and over and over again. And it was pretty amazing to see how much was revealed by this careful observation, because basically the children didn't talk much at all. So if I had relied on that, I wouldn't have got anything. So observation is critical in any setting, I would say. So building on that, nomenclature needs to be taught directly. And this is the adult's responsibility. And we have found in my research that often in the sort of spatial reasoning in mathematics education, it stems out of the geometry curriculum. Children are not given the terminology, so they cannot speak about what they have understood. So in a Montessori setting, nomenclature booklets are compiled for the child and introduced after the presentation has been given, so at a later date. So the child first has the sensorial experience, and later, when they've been working with material, the terminology is introduced. This is critical for them to communicate with each other, so I would suggest that's an important part of this project. So in conclusion, stimulating activities may be co-designed with the children. The activities need to reflect the interests and the capabilities of the children in order to ensure success. These co-designed activities are a valid avenue for children to take part in society's endeavors to mitigate the challenges of climate change. And the educational theories and pedagogical ideas suggested here may offer a basis for some new innovative or reframing of an educational methodology. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison, for this good explanation of the educational background in the Montessori. We go to the last presentation by Roberto Pasini. Roberto Pasini is a professor in landscape architecture at the University of Bologna, Department of Cultural Heritage. Previously, he has taught the Department of Architecture and Habitat Studies at the Universitario de Monterrey, and served as a lecturer, design critic, and visiting professor in urban planning and design at Harvard. His work focuses on the contemporary landscape as the field of interaction environmental system, built structures, and cultural dynamics. So thank you, Roberto, for being here today. He's going to have a presentation of an installation that he had in Monterrey. The title will be Playing, Becoming Animal, Co-Exploration in the Sierra Madre Oriental. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Laura, for the invitation. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Okay, so I will present here a few slides from a work that I've done with my thesis students at Monterrey a few years ago, and in which we involved groups of, let's say, young artists and also kids from the primary schools of Monterrey. Monterrey is an industrial city in northern Mexico. It looks like in the picture above, it's a 5 million city. Before the city, which you can see in this sort of 3D model, there was a valley covered with matorral, sort of a shrubland ecosystem, which was, let's say, erased from a part of the plains by the city, but somehow the ecosystem had already been transformed through the introduction of caprids and vines with the Spaniards when they came in the late 1500s. The matorral still survives on the hillsides and the mountain sides, and what you see marked there with a red dot is, well, a red circle is the site in which we actually intervened, recovering the beauty of this pristine ecosystem. It is not very tall vegetation. It's a sort of mat which is very biodiverse, about 5 meters high. It all started with a thesis lab and a project by my thesis student Patricio Garza de Ramos and Fernanda Rosas, who got very, let's say, inspired, and they imagined a future in which the city would start shrinking and the human community would start actually diffusing, and somehow trying to recover the wounds made into the landscape. So we actually, after the thesis, we got a grant from the university and a fund to actually propose a project of landscape installation in the Chipinque Natural Park on the Sierra Madre Oriental, which we then developed and actually managed to implement. The site is actually on the secondary region of the Sierra Madre, and it works on a sort of maintenance path that was put in place when they were constructing this electroduct, which feeds a large part of the city. This is a diagram which somehow summarizes the 3 main parts of the project. The project is developed as a sort of interpretation of a paradigm developed by 2 French philosophers, Deleuze and Guattari, which is actually termed becoming animal. Well, the sake of becoming animal is that of abandoning our anthropocentric view over the world and the landscape, and trying to transform ourselves and our way of perceiving the landscape, somehow acquiring the perceptive sphere of the animals that live in the matorral. In particular, we have selected like 4 species, of which I will tell you about. But the project is, first of all, imagine as a, let's say, trek into the landscape, an ecological route in which you can learn about the ecosystem and the way in which the ecosystem works, its metabolism, the species, vegetal species that, let's say, form the characteristic consociation of the matorral, and also the animals that live in it. We have imagined a series of installations. You see here the gate to the other world, as it is termed, which starts the trek. I cannot say that this was a work of co-design with children. It was mainly a work of co-designing with youngsters, because the artists who implemented the installation and also who contributed to the definition of the project and actually created a series of performances. Performance artists who worked in it were very young, in particular a group of performers called the Mestizo Crew from Monterrey, but also involved school children from the primary school of the city, because the existence of this natural sphere is somehow removed in the urban population. The urban, let's say, settlement is so large that most of these children had never set foot in a natural area, which is very close to where they live. So the picture you see here is the day of the inauguration, in which the first groups of children were led through this ecological, let's say, trek exploration, in which they started to learn information about the landscape that surrounds the metropolitan area and was once the pristine landscape which was in place. The track starts from the gate and somehow abandons all the infrastructures built by our society, and then start to delve into the natural environment, which is still rather integral. What you see there is a mapping of several species of animals that cross the path and can be identified by the size of the gallery they excavate into the foliage of the matorral, which is very dense and keeps track of the passage. These are a series of information about the metabolism of the ecosystem and the species that can be found there. And then, of course, the kids were led through a multisensorial experience of the matorral, which involved seeing, but also touching and smelling, using senses that we not usually exert. Then a series of installations in which the branching of the matorral are somehow intervened by artists in order to create galleries and spaces, and then more, let's say, artificial intervention that in particular are centered around clearing a glade in a, let's say, in a middle part of the path. This is the glade of becoming, because it somehow proposes and offers a sequence of installations that help you become a hare, become a bear, become a coyote, and then become a bird, in particular a green jay, which is a typical species of the matorral. And this is a longitudinal sequence that, taken all together, is what we call the becoming demon. You are not a human anymore. Once you have taken all the, let's say, playful installations, you are a demon, sort of mythical animal in the terms of Deleuze and Guattari, which is something totally different from all the animals that we usually know and we deal with, the domesticated animals, the pets. Well, this is the sequence of the becoming animals, let's say, which somehow mark longitudinal path that is, let's say, a geophilosophical interpretation of the landscape. And then, well, this explains a bit how you become a hare, you become a bear, you become a coyote, and you become a green jay. And then there is, let's say, perpendicular axis that somehow we identify as the functional trait axis, which is, let's say, defined by two formations of nopals. The nopal is a cactus that produces prickly pears, very juicy fruit, and very beautiful to see, which is in fact fed upon by bears and other animals. That is a different way of capturing the landscape, and somehow we imagine this functional capture of the landscape according to another paradigm that is that of the eco-field developed by the ecologist Almo Farina, fundamentally a way of interpreting the landscape, not in cultural terms, but in scientific terms. The metabolism of the actual very primal act of feeding that determines the perception of the landscape. We perceive the landscape as animals, as an environment in which we can identify resources that we can actually extract and exploit that serve our own living. And actually, feeding is the very basic process. So these two axes cross together in a central point upon which this installation was developed by an artist, a local artist, that is the sort of institution of the totem, which marks this coexistent and somehow intersection of the two captors of the landscape. One is cultural, geophilosophical, and the other one is scientific and metabolic, which somehow are necessary in order to interpret the landscape. Well, the idea is that of a sculptural piece that is able to support a small hanging vegetation and also some animal in habitation, in particular wasps, which in fact are still in place. And this is a sort of, let's say, recap of all I said, and somehow summarizes the experience of the glade of becoming. The kids have enjoyed this playful installation. They have played becoming a bear and becoming a green jay, which is their favorite, from which they can actually take a different perspective over the landscape. But as I said, the original paradigm was in fact developed along with sort of confrontation with groups of artists, young group of artists of the metropolitan area of Monterrey, in particular performance artists, and they have used the site in order to develop a series of shows that then have proposed in the theaters of the city, particularly Midiendo Paisajes, Los Ojos de la Piel, and embodied landscape, like choreographic exercises, but also this Becoming Something, which was a performance, like a multisensorial performance, which was set at Penn Gallery in San Pedro. And also another performance that was set before, like beforehand in our site, and then also took a long tour in different local theaters, but also abroad, reaching Canada, which actually was highly appreciated and managed to gather public funds. This was, in fact, the last result of the work Mutualismo, in which the two performers actually set on stage two animal, non-human creatures that came onto Earth in order to deal with humans and the human community in front of the damage that they are creating to Earth, to nature, particularly El Jaguar and La Serpiente, a male and female, who try to find a non-anthropocentric solution for the global crisis that is affecting the planet Earth. And in fact, the solution they go for is that of extinguishing the human race. But apart from very radical proposals that helped somehow change the way in which these activists of the area, of the metropolitan area, would deal with ecological, let's say, themes and issues, and somehow putting the ecological issue into their agenda. Well, the final, let's say, step of the route is this installation that is called the Circle of Contemplation. At the end of the track, you get to a more quiet site in which you somehow metabolize all the experiences that you have gone through, and also you start identifying the transitions in the environment, in the landscape, the ecotones you have gone through with the transitions that have occurred in your interior, let's say, conscience, in your soul, and somehow identify if you want to follow the left path or the right path at this bifurcation. The left path goes to the woods, and the right path goes to, let's say, a more unexplored space, and somehow you start another narrative that was developed, but I would keep this for another occasion, starting with the idea of the forest passage that is proposed by Ernst Jung, in which you are suggested to take the path of the rebel and abandon the conventional society and all the needs that are associated to that status. After the path and before the path, we have taken interviews of the groups of kids, and we have tried to map in this very simple graph what we have called their environmental awareness, in particular through 5 questions. We we have tried to actually evaluate their capacity to identify diversity in fauna and diversity in flora, which is a part of their sort of cognitive capture of the landscape. But also we have tried to capture their awareness and perception of beauty and the value of the landscape, which is, let's say, part of their cultural awareness of the landscape. And finally, the animal imaginary, which deals again with a capacity to perceive landscape as a cultural entity, but in intersubjective terms rather than, let's say, personal terms as beauty. And as you can see, the graph, the red graph, which is the result of the interviews after the trek, mark an expansion of the awareness of the kids, which is somehow suggestion that this experience has somehow, let's say, left something in their soul, in their intellect, in their way of relating to the world. There's a little book that we published if you want to check out more in detail. I just tried to present a very simplified narrative, and it's easily accessible. I would like to also complete, like to end this presentation with this picture, because with this slide, because there is also an image of the team that actually worked on the project, and in particular Fernanda Rosas, Andrea Ramos, and sorry, I don't see them anyway, and Patricio Garza. There are more, Lego, in particular an artist, Lego Reta, who helped, and a few others that I don't identify from this picture. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberto, for this beautiful presentation on Becoming Animal. Due to the time frame that we have, we were supposed to have the round table. I would propose to have only one round table at the very end of the afternoon, so we can have lunch now and talk with our speakers and be together. So far, thank you for all this inspiring presentation. Thank you. Welcome Maguelone Dejean-Pons from the Council of Europe. She's going to have a presentation on landscape education activities for primary schools, a pedagogical booklet. Mrs. Maguelone Dejean-Pons was the Executive Secretary of the Council of Europe Landscape Convention from 2020 to 2022. From 1978 to 1987, she was a lawyer at the court, lecturer at the University of Law and Institute of Political Science, and expert for the United Nations Environment Programme. In 2022, she was named an honorary member of the International Federation of Landscape Architects Europe. She actually got somewhat trained in landscape architecture in her way of working with architects and landscape architects. So thank you for being here. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Laura Cipriani. And it's a great pleasure and honor for me to be with you today. Thank you. And I will explain what we did in the framework of the Council of Europe and this Landscape Convention for education of landscape for children. But first of all, I want to underline the importance of this title of our meeting today, the power of play. because the power means that playing is very powerful, and that the children often is now more and more we see with eco-anxiety. I don't know how you are worried of the future and all. And I think that playing with this, it's very soft and it's like a dance, as you say, and it's a very nice way to bring them something interesting. Because I think human beings don't like to do something which is boring and which is not interesting for them. And if they consider that these activities are good for them, and they do on a voluntary basis, and they enjoy to work on this, and they give place to the creativity, because the topic is climate change, and of course it's a big challenges and problem, but also possibility to do something good and to make place for creativity. And this is very interesting. Alors, I am French, you know my accent, and I will present you a little booklet. This is a booklet, and the idea was initially to make even smaller, to put in a pocket, and to go in the countryside and outdoor and to make exercises. And the idea also is to have no any computer or electronic or just a pencil and a piece of paper, and to appeal to imagination and creativity. This was the idea. And congratulations to Laura for this nice title and meeting. This is a cover page of the booklet, and one quotation was from one Spanish author, and this quotation is, "A human being without a landscape is nothing." This is because we are like a plant, for example, and we are with the roots, and each human being, even if he travels and all, like to be from somewhere, from a place. And it's interesting to feel comfortable in one place, even if we are not born there, and even if we have several places. We work in the Council of Europe also on the topic of multi-appartenance. You can be from here, but you feel well in some places. And this is a preamble of the Council of Europe Landscape Convention. Because I will speak of this booklet, but this booklet is a consequence of this convention, because this is an international treaty of the Council of Europe with 40 parties, 40 member states who sign and ratify this convention. And of course, here I see some persons from Netherlands, from Italy, from France, I don't know, and 40 European states ratified already this text. And this text is important because they agree with this purpose, these ideas, that the landscape is of important public interest role. And you see the different aspects of landscape inside. It's cultural, ecological, environmental, social, and also good for economy. And all these concepts must be analyzed together, not separately, but together. Of course, separately to identify, but after it's many combinations. And it's important at the end for human well-being, because we must feel well in places. And it's important not only for Europe, of course, because we are citizens of the world, and it's important at a global level as an essential component of human being surroundings. And I don't want to explain everything, but it's interesting, this concept of individual and social well-being, that each people must be well, but people is not in closed areas, but live in a society. And it's important also that all society feel well in some places, not to have only closed areas in which you live in super security areas, but in a place with nice for all. And for lawyers, there is this idea of rights and responsibilities, and we work a lot also on this concept that you can ask for rights, but also you have some responsibilities in the society. And why a convention on this topic? Because it's a topic which was in the past more for painting, romanticism and all, but the changes in the agriculture, forestry and all techniques, you see this long list here, and also the transformation in global economy accelerated the transformation of the landscape. And we see now with climate change, it's more complicated even. And all these changes mean that we must think and react and do something. And the idea is to reach a more sustainable development, sustainability, balance and harmonious relationship between social needs, economic activity and the environment. And it's very interesting that the word of world harmony is included in an international treaty. And the quality also is a key word that people can enjoy high quality landscape. This we will come back with the booklet, but just to say that the landscape in this text is not only the beautiful postcard, it's all the territory, which must be taken into consideration. This means remarkable landscape. We think first to, of course, more beautiful, exceptional, like that, but also ordinary or everyday landscape, and even more perhaps degraded areas, because nobody pays attention to degraded areas. And it's a lot of to do in degraded areas, and we must be very creative for these areas. And as it's a convention, a treaty for states, not for young, for children, for citizens, but for states, because they must introduce this in the policy, public policy. And what the convention asks to states is to make legal recognition of landscape, to establish public landscape policies, procedure for participation. And when we speak of children, of young, even children must participate. And in some Council of Europe text on spatial planning, it is said also that public participation includes participation of young people, the youth. And also states commit to integrate landscape into policies. You see planning policies, but also what we call sectoral policies, cultural, environment, agriculture, etc., which has an indirect and direct impact on landscape. I can't go in detail, but just to tell you this. And you see in this long list of what states commit to do, you find awareness raising, training and education. And after identification, evaluation, setting landscape quality objective and implementation of these policies, because it's not only to remain in libraries, but to put in practice. And for education, you have the commitment of states to introduce a landscape in school and university courses, which in the relevant subject areas address the values that the landscape has and the issues raised by its protection, management and planning. So this is the basis of the work on landscape education for children. And this is a commitment of states. But to help states to put this in practice, the idea was to prepare recommendations, which these texts are adopted by the Conference of Parties and after by the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe. This means that it's very important as a political document, policy document. And you see the one is the guidelines with some provisions on landscape education, but also two other which were adopted in 2014 and 15 on landscape awareness through education and pedagogical material. And now I come to the pedagogical material, because this is this booklet, which is referred in this recommendation, and this pedagogical booklet aims to arouse curiosity and interest of pupils in landscape by inviting them, not obliging, inviting. This is a nuance of wording, but it's important to think about what they mean by landscape, to arouse their curiosity, their imagination, and to consider it with all these dimensions I spoke before, environmental, social, cultural, and economic, to make all this together. In space and time. In space, this means we must consider the geography, because the territory can be small, large, larger, and this is space. And time is now and what was before and what will be in the future. This means that it's history of the past, and to imagine the perspective of the future. And for climate change, this is important, I think. And the next sentence is important also because it says activities can lead people to imagine what their role. So the pupils must not only be passive, absorbing knowledge, but they must think what I can do myself. I am not, I am young, but I can be part of this process. And they can do something as individual, separately, and as member of society. In order to become actors, to have a role and protagonist, it's even more than actor of it. These words are important to explain. And these activities, of course, are for teachers in primary school, but also can be used in non-formal education. Non-formal mean summer camp, I don't know all in English, but in after school or during holidays, I don't know. It's free to use when people want, as they want, or people with children. And in fact, this document was prepared in two official languages of the Council of Europe, French and English, and it was possible to make some translations. And you see here the list of translations done until now. And perhaps some countries will translate later. And the idea was also to make this free. Of course, it's in the publication of the Council of Europe, but also on the website, it's possible to upload. And there is also a web version, which is not so expensive, but anyway, it's possible to upload and to take it. And when it was done, some exemplars were sent to each country, 200 exemplars for each country, and after they distributed to schools and to professors, and they sent some letters telling that it was possible to use, etc. And this, I will say some words. What is the aim of this activity, and after what is the method? Aim is, I told already. It's to raise, to arouse pupils' curiosity and interest in landscape by bringing them to think about what they mean by landscape. Because sometimes this word is very mysterious, and it's true that the convention has a definition, but it's necessary to be more flexible and to consider what is landscape really. Is it only when you go during holidays very far, sometimes 1 week per year, or I don't know, or you are living in the landscape. Each day you are in the landscape, and to explain to children that the place of life is the landscape, there is school and etc. And in this convention, also perhaps I did not explain so well, but it's not only a natural landscape, it's also urban landscape, peri-urban landscape. Is a city landscape. This cityscape, all this is a place where people live. And children can think about this and consider all these dimensions I explained, and consider also that it's results, and these words are important, of the action and interaction. Because action and interaction is both. Action of natural and human factors, and interaction of these natural and human factors. And this is very rich, because we don't need to invent something very strange, and everything is already on the territory with natural values and cultural values. It's just to open eyes and to discover what we have on the territory. And to consider landscape as an open system, constantly evolving. Landscape is not static. It always changed in the past, even climate, and it will change in the future. And how human beings always try to adapt to this environment. This is important to explain to children and to tell them, not make them afraid of the future, but to explain that it's possible to adapt and to find solutions, and to be creative for these solutions. And this is very important. And also understand the challenges of the three keywords of the convention is protect, manage, and plan. Always you find these three words together. In fact, protect is the most valuable part of the territory, or the features, is a classical way to understand heritage. Manage, you know very well in Netherlands, because the country is very well managed with hydraulic system and all, is to manage with engineering system, and all this is very important. And to plan in the convention definition is not to plan the territories, to plan the landscape means that it's possible to restore, to recover some destroyed areas. This is the meaning of definition in the convention. And take into account the particular values of the landscape, and to imagine, as I told you, the role of the future. And what is a methodology? Activities, it's very interesting, concern several subjects, and can be carried in interdisciplinary manner by together professor of history, geography, mathematics, languages, art also. It's interesting to see that landscape is at the crossroads of all disciplines, and it's possible to make references to all this, not only to one discipline, but of course in schools, one professor can take the lead and take this activity, inviting others to make their opinion, etc. And I told you that it's referred to any type of landscape. It can be natural, even if now, which is natural, it's a pity, quite don't exist more in the world, totally natural, but semi-natural, rural, urban, or peri-urban areas. And I told you already the idea of remarkable and degraded landscape. And these activities, the idea is, of course, it's possible to do inside the school grounds. Inside is in the classroom, but in the cours de récréation, I don't know, recreation area. but outdoor, and you know, of course, that children like very much to be outdoor, and outdoor means in the countryside, but it can be also in the streets, in a public garden, in a place, outdoor. And they can work with a teacher and look the facades of the houses, and all this is a landscape. And they can activities can be done individually and or in groups, depending of the activity. And what is very interesting also is that the participation of public family members is important, because children can speak with father, mother, sister, grandfather, parent, etc., and ask us what is your memory of this place, what do you consider, etc. This can be a topic of discussion, and it's interesting also this intergenerational relationship between grandparents with grandson, because they can say, when I was young, it was like this, the landscape changed, it's a memory going, and this is very rich. And in this booklet, there are 5 parts, sections: perception, identification, analysis, reflection, and reporting. And activities, there are these 24 activities, and they are linked to one of these chapters. For perception, we spoke this morning of senses. Senses, it's very interesting, are seeing, listening, touching, smelling, tasting, but also feeling. Feeling is with sound, I don't know, with mind, how you feel the landscape. Sometimes you are sad, you are happy, and this is due to the landscape. You feel well, not well. Landscape can make you happy, discouraged, etc. This is very interesting. And it's interesting also how each of these activities can be positive or negative. You see something, and also the form, the distance, the color, for seeing, for listening. It can be, it's interesting to listen, noise and the sound. The landscape, you know, all the aspect of soundscapes, all the conferences and all this with the sound of the bells of the churches, of the bells of animals, of the bells of the when the tram is coming. You can listen the sound, but also you can listen the noise. And this is very interesting to dissociate both. Touching is also interesting when you walk on something on the stones, or what is the aspect of the facade, and all these dimensions are important. Smelling also is important, because it can have a landscape has a smell, positive or negative. When you have some plants, aromatic plants, like I don't know if it's in some countries jasmine, or roses, and sometimes it's terrible. And for example, if you have a beautiful landscape but smelling is terrible, it's not a good landscape. Landscape is not only the appearance, it's also which is the content. And the taste is interesting also, because the taste is a product produced by the landscape in rural areas or even in the cities. And when the taste is good, in general, the landscape is good. It's interesting to see this association. And the activities propose also to children to make experiences. And in each class in all countries, there are children coming from different countries, continents, and each one can bring us some specialty of food of the country and compare discover that this fruit is coming from another country, another landscape, etc. And to feel is emotions. What is emotions produced by the landscape, as I told. And identification is what is what, to try to analyze, analyze is other, but to identify what it is in the landscape. Is it something natural, cultural, etc.? Is it what it seems to be? This is to forget appearance, but to go more in detail. Is it different but similar? It can be similar and different. And to go more and more in detail. I can't enter in each explanation. And after to analyze, we saw some experiences very interesting this morning of plant growth with biodiversity to see what is on the territory, how to analyze. And this is important for climate change also. Signs of animal, footprints of animals to know if there are some birds and all. Footprint of human beings. This is important for climate change because what is the impact of human being on territories? With some waste, some papers coming and some smokes and what is going on there? What is formed first? The magic of landscape. I couldn't detail all. Reflection with plant the territory. This is to invite children to be active. You can't decide. You can't plan the territory if you have to build an area. If you want to put a school, an hospital, playground, houses, where to put and what to do the best. You can't decide yourself. And some games, as place was, for example, one person has a role of environmentalist, another promoter, want to build a new building, another can play the role like theater, the role of protector of environmental heritage, cultural heritage, want to protect a whole factory, or I don't know. And after, what do you think would happen if you have take this decision? What will be the consequences of your decision? Try to anticipate, to think in advance, because a decision has many consequences for the future. If you decide to do the bridge here or here, what are the consequences? And at the end, you decide. You fill in the role of a policymaker. And can you please decide what to do? And after reporting, this is interesting because it's making the experience of the children and to explain to other persons. And the landscape path, its idea is that they build an itinerary and play the role of a guide together with a small group of children, explain to the family, come here, you can see this view, you can discover these trees, they try to see the territory not only a close area, but in the longer way. Our landscape, what to do for the future to be best? Can we restore a degraded area, etc.? And at the end, each child is invited to make an album. This is individual work. He make an album with collecting all his picture, photos, and drawings and opinions, filling little poems he can write and all. And at the end, my landscape is like this. They can also do a little newspaper exchange between the schools and celebrate Landscape Day. And at school, they can improve even their classroom, cleaning it, putting some posters, etc. And even around the school, they can try to improve, inviting other professors and families. And for each activity, you have this same structure, the aim of the activity, the subject, what to do in classroom or outside, or it can be both, when, at what time of the day, with whom, duration, more or less, it's flexible, of course, equipment, how, and key notions for the professor at the end to explain what are the main ideas. And this is a feature of what the states are invited always, to report on what they do, and on this information system on landscape policies. It's placed some questions concern education and what countries did when they ratified this convention to put in practice education. And also there is a Landscape Award Alliance, because each 2 years there is a Landscape Award. And until now it was 100 success story, we can say. But some of these projects presented by states concern landscape education. And I will present some photos just of this. This is not the booklet, but these are projects done in countries about education. And one is education and awareness raising city territory landscape in Spain, in Catalonia. Another was done by Slovenian Association of Landscape Architects. We are making our landscape with little drawings and painting from children. Another is interesting is a mayor of a municipality in Czech Republic inviting all citizens each year to think about some quotations and book speaking of landscape in an area. Another is very emotional, is how to educate children for landscape in very heavily industrialized landscape with very important pollution. Another is very nice, is in the Valley of Temple of Agrigento, and they do recover a traditional way of ancient practices of agriculture, explaining to children how to do. Another is beautiful also in Bergamo, with some traditional plants and all, explaining also how to, with a pedagogical component. Lands of bees with little children discovering the techniques of bees producing, but the impact is not only on bees, it's on the landscape, and how all this generates also good economy and social dimension, etc. Important example also in UK with the steel, it's a National Landscape Discovery Center. And in Turkey, the Dokama Park, it was possible to have big buildings in this area. The mayor decided to do this park for culture, nature, and art with an important education component. And this is my favorite picture, like you chose this. It's a beautiful project in Bulgaria. It's a lake very close to a big city. And you see this man on the salt area. And in fact, there is an important pedagogical and component in this project. And just to finish, I want to tell you that there are some publications on landscape and education. In fact, it was a big meeting, and we organized a big meeting in Tropea in Italy in 2018. And in this meeting, the idea was to analyze landscape education at kindergarten, primary school, secondary, university, and also long life learning, as we say. And in Sweden, they do a lot of long life learning. This is very interesting because for landscape, we never end to learn. We are always children. And it's very interesting to see all this diversity of experiences. And one meeting was organized in Armenia, because Armenia liked very much this booklet and distributed to all schools with support of the ministry and all. And it was very interesting event. As your nice picture of picture of this program. These are publications of the Landscape Award, other publications with some papers on landscape education. I can't explain all. And magazine also, you can find some papers on, for example, the public space is very nice, etc. And in conclusion, with these children of mentor, we can say that landscape education at all stages in life is necessary since the signatory states of the convention have expressed their desire to respond to the public wish to play an active part in the development of landscape. And in the public, it's also children. And children, if they can't vote for the moment, for example, in the future, they will do, and it's important they have knowledge of this now, and since they are young. And all this process contribute also to the United Nations agenda for sustainable development, because one goal 4, is on quality education, and we hope also that this tentative of booklet is just a tentative, it's not the end, contribute as a process to this development. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madelon. Let me introduce you for those who are not architects. Belinda is going to have a talk on dreaming the future. Belinda Tato is an associate professor in the practice of landscape architecture at the Harvard University Graduate School of Design. Tato and Luis Valerio are founding members of Ecosistema Urbano, a Madrid-based group of architects and urban designers operating within the fields of urbanism, architecture, engineering, and sociology. They've been visiting professor and giving workshops and lectures in very prestigious institutions worldwide, Harvard, Yale, USA, Cornell, and so forth. So thank you, Belinda, for being with us. The floor is yours. I hope everything works out. Thank you. Thank you, Belinda. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Belinda Tato. Thank you for the invitation to join this interesting topic related event. So I'm going to be presenting just a few projects, very few, but everything is kind of connected. So I would like to start by saying that I started my practice together with my partner in year 2000. So it's been a kind of a long journey, and we had the opportunity to work in many different parts of the world during these years. And it's been a learning process. So for us, it's been, we've been exposed to different cultures, environments, societies. So again, it's been a learning process. So I would like to start by sharing this quote that I love very much. We send the students to be educated at the school, but actually they receive most of their education on the way there from the city. So I am an architect and urban designing by training, but I've been teaching also landscape architecture. And I very much like this idea that actually the city is shaping us and we are shaping the city, and we're learning through the experience of just living in the space. So all the projects that we've been doing are based on these three kind of principles or pillars. So the first one is the environmental. So we've been doing projects that are around climatic comfort, improving urban ecosystems, and making cities more resilient. We've been working around technology, making spaces that are interactive, bringing innovation to public space, and designing open processes. And the third topic is the social, because again, I believe our work is educational or pedagogical per nature, as I was saying before. We've been doing a lot of engagement processes, and our work can bring equity to communities. So for all of these reasons, I think not only we are improving today's environments with our work, but we're also improving people's lives, and our work has a very strong impact, especially as we're talking today among the children and the younger generation, who will be shaped by these experiences. So I'm going to be presenting again just a few projects that are kind of showing this in different ways. So the first thing is I like to think that architecture is a didactic artifact. So it's not only kind of serving the purposes of, allowing a program to happen, it's also, again, shaping the behaviors and the mindsets of the people who occupy it. So in the outskirts of Madrid, in a very suburban area, there was a competition to do a kindergarten for kids between 0 and 3 years old. So our approach to the scope was to not only deliver the building, which was, what the brief was asking for, but also to deliver the public space related to it. And that is because in such a suburban area, there's not that much public space. People live very individual lives. As you could see, everybody has their own swimming pool. So the idea was how the public space and the kindergarten could become a social hub, a public space, right? So the other departure point for us was that in Europe, in the south of Europe in special, there are a lot of issues around water and water scarcity. This is an old project. So if water was an issue in 2010, just imagine how it is now. So it was very important for us not only to deliver the building and the public space, but also to guarantee that we were reutilizing the wastewater for the irrigation of the green areas. So it didn't make any sense to use drinkable water for that. And we thought that was especially important, again, not only because we're saving water, but also because we're sending a message. We're sharing a practice that is visible and perceivable and understandable by everyone, both users of the buildings, but also citizens. So we identified there is a system of microphytes. There is a company who has been implementing this in many parts of the world, and they have this kind of a little lagoon. So by putting these plants into these kind of plastic elements, the roots of the plants are floating, and therefore they're cleaning the water. So again, there is a pre-treatment system first for the wastewater. Then we're cleaning it, and then we're recirculating this water and keeping it, storing it until we need it. So this is the appearance of, when it was under construction, and this is the section. Here you can see how the microphyte lagoon becomes an absolute, kind of part of the public space that is just in front of the building. Of course, the building was energy efficient, and by the fact that we have a semi-bureaued floor plan, the first floor actually is very stable in terms of thermal comfort. So it's very efficient in every possible way. But again, water was a very important asset. Additionally, because this is set in a very industrial area, we wanted to create this kind of buffer space. So we regraded the site. As you can see, there is this topography, which is kind of out of the digging that we did for the building. We just, reorganized it in such a way that we're creating this kind of protected area. So here we can see how we have the building, but also the topographies over here. And the idea that actually these topographies not only are, kind of separating us from the outside world, because it's very, again, it's an industrial area, so it's not a very exciting landscape, but also they play a role in terms of providing, playfulness possibilities. So these topographies allow for these playful elements to be set there. So here you can see the microphyte when it was just planted. And as you can see, it's an integral part of the landscape of the building. The building was, resolved with very simple means, because of course we had to extract some of the budget from the building into the public space, but for us was just as important. Yeah, here we can see the slides and how this topography has become a kind of a playful element. And here we can see how the microphyte lagoon is already kind of, grown. And this has become a very interesting feature for the city. So everybody in the city knows that this is recycling the wastewater. So it has become a kind of a pride for the locals. And, of course, I have to mention that changing anything in a kind of innovative way, it's always a whole process. It's about changing protocols. It's about getting to speak and negotiating with the officials who need to take care of this installation and facility afterwards. So I'm not saying this was a simple matter, because of course the school is for kids between 0 and 3 years old, and there was a lot of concerns about having wastewater just in front of it. But you know, we worked it out. It made sense. It was safe, and actually, as I was saying, again, it became a very popular place for the people. So these are some images of the, you know, the playfulness. It is interesting because even if the school is just operating between Monday and Friday, the public space is very popular even during the weekends and even among the teenagers, although this is a kindergarten. So this idea of creating an infrastructure that is much more than what has been expected, and how this has become kind of, again, part of the identity of the community. So, you know, one of the things that I think is super important is that we architects, designers, you know, at some point we live, you know, we get very immersed and we get very engaged into design processes, but at some point we are living, like we are living in 3 months, in 1 year, in half a year. So it really has to be the community who take over, who are, you know, kind of connected to the proposal so that they can, you know, claim their maintenance, claim, you know, that they're meaningful, etc. So this is the local magazine, and in the cover, it showed, again, the building with the microfight lagoon. So it was, you know, the building received a number of prizes, which was good. But again, it's about the community. It's about the community that they're very proud that actually the building is so efficient, and you know, they're bound to it. The second topic that I want to talk is architecture to raise awareness about climate change. So this is a very small project in Dordrecht, in the Netherlands. It was a competition to produce a playful object in this neighborhood. So, you know, we're talking about sustainability every single day, and actually there is this kind of overwhelming pressure to come up with solutions. So you know, there is actually a trend now that younger generations, they have, again, this pressure, and sometimes it just goes beyond our capacity to react to it. So it just becomes, let's say, a burden. So I think it is super important to create possibilities, to show there is a way to move on, to show there are solutions, and to show that actually our creativity and our power and will to change things can have an impact. So in this particular case, we were talking about you know, some sort of deprived neighborhood, and they wanted to bring some innovation in the playfulness. So we thought it was important to make the point about sustainability. So we created this energy carousel, and the energy carousel functions in such a way that when kids are spinning it during the day and rotating it, this is generating energy that is stored in the batteries underground. And with that energy, we're you know, using it for the lighting in the night. So this idea that actually play and, you know, the playfulness can, you know, can become a resource. We thought that it was super important and super fun. So of course, we had to go through the whole, you know, protocol of the European Union regarding regulations about playgrounds, and it was extremely tough because, of course, it's very, you know, constraining, but at the same time, it was funny because no matter what you design, you know, people will always kind of react and use things in very unexpected ways. So there was a lot of, you know, craziness going around it. But here you can see again, you know, the system in operation, like again, how the kids are using it in a playful way and how it is generating energy. So this idea that sustainability can be playful, it cannot just be, you know, kind of worrying or sad. So urban space as a learning hub. So this is a more recent project. This is a couple of years ago. So we were in the middle of the pandemic, and we were selected to do an installation in the city of Columbus, Indiana, here in the US. The site that we were given was in front of a middle school. So it was interesting because, again, we were in the middle of the pandemic. The opening was going to be in the summer of 2021, and we didn't know whether the schools would be open. So at the time when we started this work, all the kids were doing remote classes, you know, from their homes. So the first kind of thing, the first reaction was like, okay, what can we do in a public space in front of a middle school if we don't even know if kids will be back in the summer, right? So it was interesting because first of all, we launched a survey among the kids. And as you can see, the very long red line is about what they missed the most from school. So we launched a survey, and we also had a number of Zoom meetings with the kids. And it was interesting because, what they missed the most was actually being with friends. So I very much like this idea that actually school and learning is not just about the academics, it's the social aspect, it's the emotional growth, and it's a collective experience. So again, we were trying to be efficient in terms of academics, and everybody was at home, but actually they missed very much to be around their friends. So the first approach was like, okay, regardless COVID, regardless whatever, let's try to do something that that can allow them to come physically to the school, even if we still have the social distances and all of that. So we wanted to cover space in the backyard of the school, which was a beautiful green lawn space. So we were also, interviewing the teachers, and they said it would be great to have shade. It would be great to have some climatic comfort, and it would be great to have some sitting, because there's no sitting at the moment. So as in many other cases, we had limited resources, as almost always. So we realized that we had to create a very big space, to accommodate at least 35 students, keeping the social distance, which is 6 feet, 2 meters. And how can you do that if you don't have that much budget? So we were thinking of using an inflatable structure. I'm gonna just jump, because an inflatable structure is just a piece of textile, and actually you're kind of, one of their building materials is air, right? Which is kind of for free. So we were creating this kind of space, and that's why we call it cloud room instead of classroom, because the idea was to create this kind of classroom under the clouds in the outside space, so that actually students could hold classes and get together regardless, the situation. So this is the appearance of the installation. So it was also very interesting to interview the kids. They were middle-aged students, middle school. So they're like around, 12, 13 years old. And it was extremely inspiring to see how environmentally aware they are and how worried they are about the future of the planet. So that was, again, I was very shocked, because they were very concerned about the materiality of the installation, and they were saying, whatever you do, please do not generate any waste in our backyard. So we were also very concerned about it. So this is the inflatable. When it is deflated, it's actually, it just fits in a backpack. It's very interesting. And then we reutilize the fabric afterwards. But then when it becomes inflated, it really becomes a piece of, space, a piece of architecture. So all the words that you see here, they were extracted from the interviews that we had with the kids, but also from the United Nations Declaration from Rio in 1992, because again, we noticed that this generation are very environmental concerned or aware. So we also had these yoga balls to play as seats. And so this is the school. As you can see, the height of the element was just as the school. And I didn't get too much into the climatic comfort, but actually that was a very important feature, because we were all the time bringing in, kind of a breeze, and that breeze removed all the hot air through the opening up, in the upper part. So it created a very natural breeze, and it was extremely comfortable compared to the outside. So, well, this is here, you can see the scale, etc. And, it was extremely fascinating. Again, we have thought about this idea of the outdoor classroom, but it was very inspiring to listen to one of the teachers. So when we were putting together the installation, the school was about to start, and then started. And one of the teachers came to us and said, you know what, I can do any kind of class here. I can teach an English class. I can ask them to pick up some words and just come up with some, a poem. I can teach them a math class, because I can ask them to estimate, the geometry and the volume of air inside the structure. I can teach them a science class, because the shade of the volume is going to be changing, minute by minute and hour by hour. I can teach them a drama class, because, this is stage. So I was blown away by these comments, because it was like, wow, I have never thought of so much. So this idea that actually when we are designing spaces, we're creating frameworks and infrastructures for things to happen, but it's always beyond our imagination what happens. So it was really beautiful and inspiring. So not only we again provided this kind of inflatable, but there was also this kind of color code. So there was 3 LED lights, LED strips, and one was connected to the deforestation, the CO2, and the temperature. So what we did was to translate the graph of the last 120 years since 1900 of the deforestation levels in the US, the CO2 levels, and the temperature change, and translated that into a color code. So actually, anytime that you came, the inflatable, the cloud room would have a completely different zine because it will be showing this kind of, dramatic change over the years. So these are some instances. And then again, how people take over, how people reimagine, how people rethink spaces. So this is a film from Instagram of somebody, who just filmed it. And then somebody flying a drone through the inflatable. So this idea that, again, what we usually do are frameworks, infrastructure, elements that are rethought, reimagined, and reinterpreted by people. And I love this idea of, kind of an open process. And here, again, the moment that you do something, people are going to behave and people are going to organize things that are, not regular. So here there was some dance performance because all of a sudden this became a stage in the backyard of the school. And then urban design as a participatory learning experience. So as again, I'm an architect. When I was a student in the 90s, I studied both in Madrid and in London. And at the time, there was very little mention about the social dimension of our work. It was mostly, again, I'm an architect and urban designer, so it was very much about geometry, originality, the concept, and then the numbers about urban design, like, what fits where and why, right? But there was very little consideration about, how do you design with the people or for the people, and how do you engage into any kind of conversation with the, with the people. So somehow from the year 2000, when I started my practice with my partner, we started to, kind of, trying to understand how to fill the gap, because at some point we realized that we couldn't do any kind of urban design and, designing a public space or designing, a master plan for the city without taking into any consideration of from the public, from the people, from the users, from the, it didn't make any sense. So over the years, we've been kind of developing a number of, participatory processes in many parts of the world. And this is just a few of them, but we've done many more. And it's been a kind of a learning journey. So I was never trained for doing that, but we've tested many different things in different parts of the world, and as I was saying at the beginning, we've been shocked of how, culture shapes people and people shape cities. So you cannot just have a kind of a copy-paste approach, saying, what worked in this place will work, also somewhere else, right? So we've been doing things with city officials, with developers, with creative people, with women, with indigenous communities, with many different groups, right? Depending on the context. But we've also worked a lot with kids, right? So for instance, in this project, which was in Norway, we were doing a series of participatory activities, and one of them was engaging 1,400 kids from the local community to do ideas for the square. We were to redesign the square, and they worked at their schools with their art teachers to produce these concepts. So it was very interesting. I like the idea of, kids becoming some sort of ambassadors of the projects, because of course, adults were super overwhelmed. We're always, working a lot. And sometimes we are just, we just can't digest any more information. However, kids, they can, mediate between what they get at the school, what they learn, and bring into the houses. So it was interesting because they became very engaged. As a matter of fact, I was living in this city for a few months, and when I was in the public space, I was walking, or I was in the supermarket, the kids would come to me like, oh, are you the architect who is doing this? Oh, we did this in the class and we learned this and we would like to have this or whatever. So it was all of a sudden they became very empowered to think about the future of their public space. But we've done this, again, in many different environments. So sometimes we do have a lot of resources. Sometimes we do have a lot of time. Sometimes we don't have any resources or any time. So in this particular case was in Tegucigalpa, in Honduras. We did a number of activation in the public spaces, but the very last day I said, okay, you know, that's not enough, let us do something else. So we were working with 120 students from the university. And the idea was to show that actually when there is no time, you know, when there is so many constraints, we still can do something, we still can do a lot. So, you know, we said, okay, let's do a participatory process in just 2 hours. So we send the students with 2,200 post-it notes into the streets to interview. So each one of them had to interview 20 people, right? So these 2,200 post-it notes create a mural that says participa, which is participate. And this was part of the final report. So in 2 hours, we were able to run something quick that was very effective. And it was a empowering activity, not only for us, which it was, but also for them, because they realized of the power of the collectiveness and the power of action, right? And sometimes, you know, bureaucracy or city officials, they become too paralyzed about, again, protocols and bureaucracy. How you do that? You know, how much time do you need? How many weeks or resources? And sometimes we can just get into action and do things. And this is another example. So we've done, again, many things with kids, many things with teenagers in different parts. This was in Asunción, the capital of Paraguay, and we were doing the master plan for the historical center, which was an international competition that we had won. So one of the things that we noticed is that the kids who had been born in Asunción, they were completely detached from the historical center. So the historical center had been some sort of deprived, and they didn't know it. So, you know, they had been born in that city, lived there for their whole lives, but they were living in the neighborhoods, in the suburbs, and they didn't know this area. So we thought, we were talking with a professional, you know, with a historian who was very much into heritage. And he said something that I found it was extremely beautiful. He said, you cannot take care of what you don't love. So this idea of creating emotional bond with your environment is super important if you want the new generations to take care of it, right? So if you are completely detached from a neighborhood, when you become a professional, you're going to demolish it because you don't care. So what we did was a kind of a cartoonish version or cartoon version of the main buildings in the city historical part. And there was, you know, a conversation with the schools. So they had to do an activity and come to the historical center with their families during the weekend to create this kind of a story that had this as a kind of a backstage. So the idea was to create at least the activity to come to the historical center as a family activity. So this is also in Tegucigalpa. So this idea of how can we do an activity? How can we make kids to reflect about the future of the neighborhood from an individual perspective? So they had to do an individual exercise of rethinking the route from their home to the school, but then make a collective exercise in the class. So they have to negotiate, because again, you know, it's like, it's not just about your individual ideas, like how all these ideas come together, make sense, and how can you calibrate them. So this is in Cuenca, Ecuador, in which we were working for the courtyards, or, you know, the inner courtyards of the buildings. They had been parking lots for the last 50 years, and they needed, you know, there was a new transit systems coming up. So there was a need and you know, an amazing opportunity to remove parking lots from these spaces and do much more. So it was fascinating because we designed this kind of element, which is kind of, you know, this cardboard, which is kind of representing the courtyards. And we did this with many schools. Also, the beauty of this is that it can be easily replicated. So we did it with, you know, let's say 3 schools ourselves, but also we gave, you know, the template to the teachers, so it could be replicated in other schools. So again, it was this idea of, you know, what is your individual approach? What would you like to see in your patio, in your courtyard? But also, as a collective, you know, what do you want to see? So this is another project. So again, every time that you're, you know, all these examples are not examples just of an educational activity. They kind of plug into a larger scope. So we're always working for the master plan, or the redesign of a space, and we are engaging with different, collectives across the society in different ways to get their input. So in this case, I'm showing the activities that we do with the children or with the teenagers. So in this particular case, this is in the city of Barranquilla in Colombia. So we were to design a new park. So this is a very sensitive environment because there is a large community from Venezuela with, a very vulnerable community who moved to Barranquilla, and they moved into a very vulnerable neighborhood. So there was some kind of frictions between these different communities. And the idea was to create this public space, this park, as a way of bringing communities together, but also enhance the environmental conditions, the public space, and bringing some also economic development opportunities. So one of the things that was important was to create this bond between the community and the park. So we were doing this activity that was about interviewing the people from Venezuela to identify what were the species, the trees, the plants, the bushes that they missed the most from their hometowns. And it was a very simple and very beautiful activity. And we did it both in the community, but also at the schools. So all the children had these kind of very personal stories connected to trees, to their childhood, because trees and nature are very connected to gastronomy, to, healing, to, a lot of beautiful stories. So it was extremely beautiful and extremely useful to actually identify what were the tree palette for this new public space. Another activity, a very quick one. In this case, we were not in charge of the planning. We were just doing some participation. This is in Exuma in the Bahamas. It was a collaboration with Harvard University and the government of the Bahamas. But it was this idea, like, how can you come to a community to ask them for ideas about the future, how to improve the resilience of the island, how to make the community more sustainable in every possible way, economically, environmentally, socially, etc., and how to engage the younger generation. So we did these origami flowers, and the idea was to collect their ideas. As you can see, the red was for the problem. So we were asking the kids, what do you think is a problem right now? And the blue is for the opportunities. What do you think could be an opportunity in the future? So each one of them, we went to all the local, it was a small town, we went to the local schools and the high school, and each child filled out, a problem and an opportunity. And then the idea was like, okay, instead of just saying, okay, thank you so much, how can we give something in return? How can we display all of this so that they can, they have a chance to also, get a feeling of how the community is feeling? So we created this, what we call the Origami Garden of Exuma Dreams. So the kids were able to come and read everybody else's thoughts, ideas, concerns about the future. And it was an extremely ephemeral installation, but it was very beautiful. It was also this idea that, when we're gathering and collecting, how can we make it public and open to the people who took the time? And this is the last project. I think I don't know how I'm doing with the time. This is the last project I think I'm showing. So this is in Norway again. This was a competition that was calling for ideas for that square, which actually more than a square was 2 parking lots and a driving space. So this idea of playfulness and this idea of future in connection to providing experiences. So in many cases for participation, we're always kind of arguing and discussing around renderings, but we are trying to get a little more into action. How can we change the space? How can we provide an experience so that actually, it's a more meaningful conversation? So in this particular case, the square was going to be rebuilt. And our proposal was to do a series of activities, a series of experiences, what we called urban actions, to show that actually the space could be much more than a parking lot. So in this case, we invited Boa Mistura, they are collective from Madrid, and they transformed this parking lot into a beautiful Norwegian pattern. Here you can see from the sky. And so over this kind of tapestry or a mat, we created a number of activities. So one was Cream Hammer. So we did an activity with the farmers from the area. These are the students from the Bergen Architecture School. We did the Green Hammer. We did the Play Hammer, which was an toys exchange activity. So a way of bringing all the kids together around an activity, but also to talk about the future of the public space. We did Light Hammer, etc. And all of this informed our design process. We ended up doing, a project that was synthesizing many of the requests that we had through all the different activities that we had. And in the end, the main feature of the square is a water feature in the summer, which is actually a skating rink in the winter. So this idea also of playfulness, this idea that actually the public space, what people were demanding was not only to have a contemplative space, a comfortable space, but a space of activity, a reason to come together. So this is the Christmas card from the city, in which, again, the skating rink has become a kind of a very important feature. And then I just want to make a point about the teaching. So I teach a class on participation. So over the last, 6 years, I've been teaching this class. And for me, it's also a learning journey. So I like to think, I have this prompt like, what can we use participation for? And of course, this list is becoming longer and longer because the students are coming up with all this amazing set of ideas of how can we create participatory process for different purposes. And what is in the class is about the how, right? What is the tool for to enable that participation? And I would like to say that actually there is a lot of outcomes that are about playfulness and about games around participation. So there are students who are addressing participation through video games or virtual reality experiences or board games or 3D printing or cartoon making, etc. So these are just, oops, I don't know why it doesn't play. So these are just some examples of some of the outcomes that I had in the class. So for instance, in the top left, you have, some students were very concerned about, again, environmental awareness among the children. So they were creating these biomes, these planets out of Play-Doh, which were showing the different ecosystems on Earth. And then they did the digital version. So they did the Play-Doh, and then they actually literally did the game. Then, the one on the top center, it's about virtual reality experience. So, how can you talk about sea level rise, but instead of just talking about it, how can you immerse people into the experience? So they came to South Boston and they created this immersive experience. So to people to really kind of realize of how what's the meaning of this. So this idea of, again, providing experiences, not only talking theoretically about this. And then the one on the top right is about anxiety and mental health issues. The one on the top left is how to program the driverless cars in a way that actually is, we bring the inputs as a society. So anyway, so there is a lot of ways of engaging into playfulness to talk about climate change and other topics. And I would like just to end with, these are the credits from the, and I would like just to end with this video, which is from a project that is under construction right now. It is this idea of creating an open air classroom. So how can we, some sort of blend the activity that is taking place on an university campus? How can we bring it to the outdoors and create an experience that is for everyone? So I'm just gonna play it and then I will. Can you hear the sound?
Imagine an open university.
Can you hear the sound?
Yes, we can hear the sound.
Okay, great.
Imagine an open university that integrates into urban life. Interactive public spaces that promote conversations between disciplines. Technologies and digital interfaces that boost knowledge sharing. In a natural, bioclimatically conditioned environment. Creating connected spaces that enhance exchange between students, teachers, and visitors. The main boulevard at the Universidad de Malaga connects existing facilities and opens up the campus to the public, creating a pedestrian walkway activated by hubs or public squares with learning and leisure spaces, incorporating technology to create an interactive urban environment connected to the digital world. an ecological corridor that efficiently manages resources, creating diverse natural landscapes. Pedestrian walkways protected by natural buffers become the perfect setting for meeting up, resting, and relaxing. Through a digital application, users can interact with the surrounding environment and access an augmented reality with academic and cultural content. The Climatic and Digital Hub integrates collaborative learning spaces, allows the interactive modification of environmental conditions, and generates all of the park's energy. The Hub's canopy hosts technological systems that connect users to the physical space and the digital environment. Along the boulevard, open classrooms are equipped to extend the university experience to public spaces. An extensive network of sensors generate open data that enables climatic research and allows real-time identification of the most comfortable zones of the boulevard. The tranquil olive grove's open library encourages reading and resting while promoting and protecting biodiversity. A connected, open, interactive, and green campus, an intelligent natural space with positive energy balance and bioclimatic comfort. A positive space where collaboration, creativity, and learning define the urban scene.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Melina, for this talk and for sharing the participatory practice that you had in your teaching experiences, Martin. This morning we didn't have the first roundtable, and we should have talked about the power of playful educational methods. And in this afternoon, the idea was to be much more linked to climate change. I will start and say from the first topic on playful educational methods to ask you what do you think are the powers and limitations also of playful educational methods in your discipline in particular? Because for sure there are opportunities, but I guess there are many limitations as well. Roberto, you have the microphone, so you can start.
I think we're mainly playing in the School of Architecture. We're playing to develop skills that might be useful in the future, in real life, let's say. And it's important to play because you build up, let's say, conceptual models and intellectual models that then can be used, put to use in like real life and during your career and the real world. And then you have to keep on playing also when you're an adult, or when you should be an adult, but you might not. I've never felt adult actually. And because you have to maintain those skills, and playing is a tool to do that and to update and to keep up with the transformation of the world, I would say.
Thank you. It's a difficult question, but I think that I was remembering, because we spoke of South Africa, I went to Johannesburg, it was in 2012, I think, for the UN Summit. And in the entrance of the NGO village, it was a sentence of Robert Schwann. I was thinking to this now. And the sentence was, the problem is not the lack of information, it's the lack of inspiration. And I think with playing give inspiration. And I think that for urban planners, architects, I think it's important to think what can inspire children in the future. Because we are in a world in which everything is very, sometimes, not boring, but symmetric, dark, and this and this. And I think it's important for children to give them happiness. And I think that playing is a way to have inspiration, in fact, and to have freedom. This is the most important. And to think what they want, how they can be creative, not absorb information, but create something for the future. This is my opinion. A little of poetry. I think it's important.
I think for me, what I was talking about earlier in education, the dichotomization of play and learning, like it's a tragedy to me that it's been separated. And that's what attracted me to Montessori, because all the hallmarks of play, the engagement, the use of the imagination, the freedom of movement, of who you associate with, of ideas, of innovation, that to me is learning. But unfortunately, often in classrooms, that's not what you see. You see it mainly driven by a curriculum that has to be followed, lack of movement, lack of imagination, and by assessment that's quantitative. So this is what's driving the curriculum. And so play doesn't really have a part. So it's for me, it's really unfortunate that education is missing that play, because I think the optimal learning takes place within play.
Belinda, I don't know if you can hear. Oh, we also have Valerio. So, how do you think that? What are the powers, but also the limitations of playful educational methods?
Yeah, I mean,
you know, I think. Oh, go.
No, you go.
Well, Valerio, okay.
Okay, I will go. So, you know, one of the main limitations, if I think about the implementation of such dynamics in architecture, is a matter of time. You know, you are in a very strong discipline which has very precise boundaries. So the main work that I do with my students is like to deconstruct and at the same time, you know, to develop new categories within the way that they perceive architecture. And I think that, you know, time can be one of the main limitations, because when you work in design or university, they actually, you know, they come and they want to be architects. And according to the place where you are, for example, moving around the world, I understood that the concept of architecture that we have in Italy is different from Albania, which is different from the Netherlands. So at the same time, is a kind of psychological work with the students as well, implementing new things and helping them to perceive the reality where they live in a different way. And I think that time can be one of the main challenges. At the same time, one of the main risks for this kind of approach, you know, is the commodification of the concept of play. No, play is disruptive. So the main idea is that we should not go into a sort of commodify tool that we say we want to implement, but should be always, you know, a way to develop a lateral thinking. And since play has been in the last years, you know, one of the main keywords, everyone is talking about play, you know, and also the fact that this symposium is happening is because the interest around play and playfulness is growing even more, and more people are actually getting involved in this. But at the same time, to avoid a kind of, how can I say, a kind of academicization of the play, but always working with kids and working with communities can help us to avoid this kind of commodification of the concept itself.
Yeah, a lot of things have been said already, and I agree with everything. So, you know, just a couple of comments maybe. So I like very much the idea of, you know, happiness and empowerment. You know, we're living in a very kind of moment that is kind of very dark and sometimes very overwhelming. And I think that we have to, you know, to make students and children and the new generation to feel that they really have the power to kind of overcome the crisis and the challenges that we have ahead of us. So this idea of empowerment, I think it is super important. And then the idea that, you know, I like to think that actually cities shape citizens and the other way around. So, you know, the better the cities are, the better the citizens are, and the other way around. So this idea of playfulness, hopefully we can, you know, we can embed it into everything that we do. You know, I would say that, you know, mental health is actually a huge issue around the planet right now. There's a lot of things going on. So this idea of playfulness, which is embedded into everyday experience. So yeah, I think we have a lot of challenges, but I think it's also, I love my work, so yeah, I think it's playful.
Yeah, definitely. And I will start from you the next questions, because we live definitely in a world which is very digitalized. So everything is very digital. What do you think? How could landscape and natural elements still play a role in education? How would you convince young people, children, university students, or whatever, about the importance of studying landscape issues and going outside, getting out of the class, getting out in the outdoor?
Yeah, I totally agree. That's why I played the last video, and I didn't get into the project, but I wanted to make sure that we make the point about the digitalization of our lives. I always say, it's very difficult now for somebody to fall in love in a bus stop, because actually everybody's on their phones. Like, you're not kind of the serendipity that used to happen is kind of becoming very difficult. But at the same time, I think as designers, we have to embrace the digital layers. So instead of saying, it's terrible, the question is, how can we integrate them? How can we make people to come back or to engage more with their environment, with this physical experience, maybe by embedding some of these digital layers. So in this project in Malaga, what we're doing is not only designing the physical infrastructure, the space, the boulevard, but also the digital layer that goes with it. We're coding the software. So this idea that, again, is not an enemy. It's a way of also engaging with the younger generation, which are extremely, we're all digital, but they're even more. So yeah, I think it's a design issue, and we have to, probably there's a lot of room for improvement and for innovation.
Thank you. What about the audience? What's landscape? How we can convince that our students to get outside, to be in the landscapes? Sometimes to me it's actually tough, to spend much more time in the outdoor rather than indoor classes, especially for those people who are in the landscape discipline. I would say would be crucial. What do you think?
Well, from an educational point of view, I think movement is critical to cognitive development. And the less we move, the less we think, the more passive we become. And the landscape offers us that opportunity to move in meaningful ways, in large scopes of ways, right? Do challenging things, climbing and digging and whatever, we're climbing on structures. So I think it needs to be goal-directed activities in the landscape that are meaningful. So not just a walk, right? It needs to be part of some vision and of the child's vision, what is important to them. And I think children do buy into these things like climate change, and that comes with education. But I think this education for movement in the landscape has to start at a very young age and can't just be introduced as young adults. It has to be part of their development, part of what they're comfortable with, right? So from a very young age, they're moving out and doing things in the landscape.
Are we too late at the university level?
You might have to bribe them.
I think sometimes it's dirty of the school, but also of the family. The family must be encouraged to make, picnics, to go outside and to facilitate for them the life, to make easy to go out with cars or buses, public buses, I don't know, proximity. Because if not, for some families it's difficult to make this. And it's necessary that in public places, the public transport and all should be facilitated for them.
I try to incorporate like sessions outdoor in my courses, and I tend to have my students go around and then see the world from like the physical exploration. I think that it is true. We have to incorporate somehow this digital level in our world. It's part of our let's say present, but it is somehow tends to be overabundant and diminishing our faculties as human beings and as beings in general, living beings, let's say. the physical experience of the world is much more overwhelming than that digital overexposition tends to probably weaken certain critical capacities, I would say. So it is something that has to be integrated in our capture of the world, that has to be kept in a perspective within the physical reality.
Yeah, it would be very interesting on this point, actually, how we could go primitive, I would say, in the landscape. I think it's more radical rather than going outside with exploring with the media. So how we can become animal, if we want to, to quote you, and be in the wilderness somewhat. I would like also to ask you some question regarding the outdoor and co-design practices in particular, because when we co-design, you know, there is a co-design, yes, with children, there is a co-design with different stakeholders, but also nature is a co-designer, and sometimes we forget, and probably what you think about it. Maybe I can start from Belinda and Valerio, and then we talk all together. So how this process of co-design should somewhat imply natural forms and different ways of experiencing the landscape. So the landscape, the animals, the natural environment can become a co-designer in our design. So Valerio, I see you.
Okay, I can start. You know, I think, you know, what is interesting about this, I think that the answer, you know, is yes. And it comes also, I think that we should really understand the landscape from a cultural point of view, no? Each country has a different landscape, and the way that people actually react or interact with that kind of landscape also need a kind of study regarding the way that they intended. The way that we intended in Italy, if we talk about, you know, art or, you know, paintings, is different from the way that other countries, which is related to history, which is related to political regime. So I think that, yes, nature can be a very interesting co-design feature, but at the same time, it needs a kind of proactive attitude from our side, also understanding the way that the people that are inserted in that landscape, they perceive it. We can talk about landmarks, we can talk about specific elements that they actually can activate a kind of poetic reaction with them. And I think this is something also that Belinda showed in her work, no? This way of intending landscape as a co-design feature, also going to understand the context, or what Roberto showed us, this way always of immersing ourselves in that kind of culture and extrapolating that kind of elements that can be design elements.
Yeah, I agree. I think, you know, somehow it's like kind of trying to change the point of view or the perspective. And, you know, somehow I think the landscape is not a top-down kind of discipline. It's not something that we can just orchestrate from our office and say, you know, this is what it has to be there. It's like, how can you articulate, how can you design a process that is informative? How can you incorporate not only the different communities, which even if you try the hardest, it will always be difficult and challenging, because, you know, people are like, you know, we're all, again, as I was saying before, we're all overwhelmed with work and also with information. So sometimes it's very difficult to get that conversation going. But also the other species, like, again, from when I was a student in the 90s, it was very much, again, top down, top down, top down. There was very little mention about anything. So somehow it's like, how can you articulate a process that is a little bit more open, that is, you know, kind of acknowledging the different kind of agents and stakeholders? How can we make that design still meaningful and consistent? So it's a whole process that I think, you know, in a very humble way, I'm still learning, and I like that anyway, because as he was saying, every single city, every single community has different kind of culture, So it's a very sensitive process, but I think it's beautiful. Yeah.
So how can we incorporate the voice of the landscape into the co-design process? Which voices are we talking about? Nature, animals, plants, wind, sand, I don't know. And how? And if we are able to.
I don't know, but I think that this is a way, a progressive way to start to analyze, to identify, to analyze, to understand, to observe. It's a process, and step by step, it's coming a kind of opinion, common opinion of people living in the territory that this is the best for the future. I think it's coming step by step. And this is a way, it's methodology, I can say. And I wanted to say just before that sometimes in some countries for teachers, it's even difficult for security rules to bring children out there. And this is different sometimes in countries. And I know that in Nordic countries it's very easy. In Finland, in Sweden, in Norway, children go outside in the forest. In other countries, it's very difficult because there is many rules of security, and the teachers are afraid now to be responsible of some outdoor activities. This is a problem. And even in the school yard, if there is a tree, if a branch is falling, or this is a real problem. We want more and more insurance security, and after the children are far from the nature and
too much security.
Never too much, but I don't know why. The result is that we are fatigued. And in some countries, they start again to put plants in the school. And during many years, it was everything without plants. Now it come back to put again. It's evolution. I don't know how to say.
Well, I think it is a particular challenge nowadays, and I hear what you say. I just noticed myself in the Montessori classroom when I was teaching 15, 20 years ago. We mentioned earlier cosmic education, where the classroom was just supposed to be a key to the wider world. So the child would be stimulated by just a few key items in the classroom and then want to go out. And goings out was a big part of the curriculum. So they'd be stimulated by something, then they would arrange with a parent or an assistant to go out and investigate further into the real world and then come back and build on that. So the classroom didn't contain all the information in the world. It was just key things. But now I've seen the security issue becoming quite frightening, actually. The doors are locked now. I know in the States, the teachers are being trained to fire guns, right? So they can shoot intruders. And parents are very anxious. I don't know if this is a result of COVID, but they don't want their kids leaving the schools. And so unfortunately, it seems to me that that world has shrunk and shrunk and shrunk even more. And I also want to add that it's very exciting to come here and hear education being talked about in the Faculty of Architecture. And there's obviously no reason why it shouldn't be, because I find that in education itself, it's a very conservative institution, and there's not often change coming from within education. And there's a big divide between research and education at a university and what we see in schools, and the two don't cohabit at all in any way. So I think it's got to be a multi-pronged approach. So from different faculties, whatever they are, changing, innovating, and then also, I think it's a place-based thing, identifying the problems or the areas that could be worked on within that place, the cultural norms of that environment. So it's a very broad scope of things that can be done, I think.
Well, I think that first of all, we have to realize that we were designed by nature and not the opposite, but at a certain point we decided to split. It was the moment in which self-awareness somehow has separated the human race from the rest of nature. And like the pristine condition of a living being entails some risks, which are mainly that of becoming prey of some other being, but also running into some kind of accidental event. During the process of civilization, we have mainly tried to shape our environment around us in order to prevent any risk of that sort, let's say natural risk. Then things have degenerated in certain situations because they have created anthropogenic risks like that of shootings in schools or outside schools or whatever. But those are a different situation maybe. So design with nature now, there is a term that very often, yeah. It is recurrent in the debate, which is that of coevolution. So we are starting to understand that somehow we have to go back to this original state in which we cannot simply determine our environment like unilaterally, but we have to negotiate with the other, whatever is the other, which is in fact nature, and of which we were part, and we maybe in the long term, and somehow hopefully we will manage to get back to this condition of communion, I would say, with nature and the planet. Otherwise, some kind of catastrophic event will soon intervene.
This actually leads to the second topic, like on climate change, because risks are part of climate change somewhat. And probably also in the past, risks were part of life. In some countries, I'm thinking, Asia or countries which are much more affected by climate change issues or extreme events, they actually take it for granted. So the risks are somewhat embedded in life, and probably we forgot. We forgot about it, and we were too eager to change things in our environment. So this leads to the climate change issues, and we said that the future generation will be the ones will be most affected by climate transition. And what do you think are the ones that are going to save us, despite the fact that they were not responsible for changing the whole world? What is our responsibility as adults? What is the responsibility of all the generation in this big picture, confronting with the kids? I don't know if my question was clear enough. How do we feel about it? Alison, everybody was looking at you.
So, sorry, are you talking about how do we feel about putting this responsibility on the children?
Because on one hand, now we are trying to understand the perspective and how they can shape and imagine the future. Somewhat we are asking them to solve what was created by somebody else. So how to deal with this strange relationship? You are going the one that is going to design, but also you are not responsible for the future.
The sins of the fathers, right? We inherit them. I think for me, it's important that we have a positive outlook so that children can engage with hope and with a vision. Because I know another Montessori dictum was that you don't pity the child because that renders them useless, that renders them helpless. And we don't want to render anyone helpless. So I think we can't be gnashing our teeth and despairing, but rather think it's a challenge that we'll be capable of mitigating and overcoming.
And it won't be the end of our challenges, right? There'll be others down the road. There have always been challenges. I mean, this does seem particularly overwhelming. And I think it's very important to have faith in the ability of humans to solve their problems.
So to have hope.
To have hope,
To have hope
absolutely.
and start from design also.
Yeah.
Designing is hope or dreaming is hope, like Belinda was showing in the garden of dreaming.
Thank you. I think that, in fact, climate change, it was always climate change. If we see the geological evolution and all, but the problem is that we accelerated this process. And this is a fault of human being. And the problem, I think, is that we know this since many years, but nobody was doing nothing. And this is unacceptable when we know the problem and we don't act in prevention and in anticipation. And human beings, I don't know why, but always wait the catastrophe to wake up and to decide to do. And it's, I don't know why, it's a humanity way of being, and why not to prevent and to anticipate. And this was in many policies since many years in international text at global level, since 72, the Stockholm Conference. If you look these documents in 72, everything was said in international documents. Why so many years to do and to meet again and to meet again and to decide to make action plans? And this costs a lot of money, more than if we do in prevention. And this, I don't have an answer for this, but it's important to see when a decision is taken, what are the consequences, the chain of causalities bringing to consequences. Because if not, we continue this, and a lot of money is for something what happened in the world, and no money for solving important problems. This is not logical.
Yeah, I think that we have to be able to curtail our commodities, comforts, and that's the problem, because in theoretical terms, everybody is in favor of an action to somehow counteract the ecological collapse that is looming, sort of. But then when it comes to our life, we have to accept a reduced gain, profit, or comfort, or commodities available, then it becomes difficult, it becomes tricky. So I would say that hopefully the future generation will manage to actually deflect the trajectory, which seems now already drastically compromised, but like the responsibility that has been exhibited by present and past generation is not very satisfactory, I would say, and certainly insufficient. So you have to act in order to save, first of all, yourself and your life, and in fact, I would say the planet. Probably the Earth has showed the ability to go through various forms of life in its millionaire history. This would be the 6th mass extinction that if it has to happen. So it has regenerated new forms of life, but certainly like 90% of the species that we know will perish. So I would say that starting from ourselves in our ordinary, routines is a good tool to measure our real will to proceed ahead.
Thank you, Roberto. And this led me to Belinda, because she showed us examples of dreaming the future with kids and flowers. And I was wondering what were the dreams of these kids? What were dreaming for the island that probably is in serious difficulty maybe in the future?
Yeah. Yeah, it was extremely inspiring. Like the students, when they are middle schoolers, they were very ambitious. They really want to change the world, and that's for me, that's awesome. Because again, I agree with everything that has been said. I trust the future generations. I think human creativity will be able to deal with this. I want to keep myself optimistic, but also I think climate change should be part of the curriculum today at the schools. Like we probably were not taught formally when we I don't remember anything about that, like very seriously when I was a student. However, I think there is not only the need, but also we do have the information, we do have the facts, the data, the figures, and students and kids are very eager to know. So I think there is an amazing opportunity to actually making this part of the curriculum at the schools. And I already noticed, I don't know if it is a coincidence or whatever, but like there is a huge trend now about shopping secondhand clothes. So I think the younger generations are very concerned. Like, I can speak, about my personal life. Like my daughter is super concerned. She would never take a plastic bag from a store or whatever. And I don't think it's her. I think it's her generation, because they're overwhelmed. We're kind of passing on the message that this is dangerous and it's kind of overwhelming and all of that. So of course they have a burden on top of them, but also I trust that we have to keep the optimism and to teach them there is a way to come out, which probably has to do with what has been said. We probably will have to negotiate our lifestyle, and probably we cannot keep up with, just assuming that we can take everything for granted forever. Maybe we will have to kind of, of course, sacrifice a little bit of our commodities, but I think there is a way out, and I think they're very powerful. I have a very strong hope that actually, they're in charge, and I think it will be okay.
So kids are more aware right now of what is going on than we are, and probably are more active somewhat.
I think so. I think so. I mean, you can't escape it. Somehow it's overwhelming at the same time. A friend of mine was telling me that actually there are psychologists now who are specialized in climate change anxiety for the kids. So there are kids who are already suffering from this, which is kind of, on the one hand, is scary, but at the same time, I think that's because they're super aware. So I think, I don't think climate change was a term when I was a kid, right? And of course now it is, and there will be even more issues because there will be migrations related to extreme heat and all of that. So they're very aware, but I trust human creativity and intuition for survival, and yeah.
Valerio, what is your thought?
Mm-hmm.
I think that education is the key. When I presented the example from the School of Architecture for Children in Favara, it's a very nice formula indeed. It's a school that they do after school. It's like every module, it's one module every week for 3 hours. They do a theoretical one, let's say for 1 hour on Friday, and they do a small workshop on Saturday. And the people that are invited to the school, they are people talking about biomaterials. We talk about inclusive playgrounds, and the children that you have there, they are like from 7 years old to 12 years old. But you can see that when you told them about the concept, is a structure that is actually nurturing them to understand more about this topic. So they did 1 week before that we went the module about rubbish in urban environment. How can we actually, create collectors, create stuff? And when they did the playground with us, they designed also something, for the playground in order to collect rubbish. So you can see that really it's an incremental process, no? And I'm d'accord with Belinda. It's like it should be a module or in school, or there should be some initiatives like this, which is a private one, but with very accessible price. The students pay like a ridiculous, very small amount of money for 1 year. And they are children from the community. And when I was talking with the dean of the school, because they also have a dean, it's like a kind of proper school on a small town in Sicily. And the students, the children, they also discuss with their parents home. So the way that they park the car, the way that they actually collect the rubbish at home, the way that they are educated at the School of Architecture for Children is reflected directly in the kind of relationship that they develop at home with their parents. So education starting from a small age, I think is the key, and then, you know, goes through high school, university classes, but you have to prepare the soil, no? You have actually to put a seed that can grow cycle after cycle in every educational system.
Yeah, this is a very good idea to have really climate change classes for students. And there are some samples like Favara, but also I'm thinking Genova, at least in Italy, they are popping up this kind of activities from a bottom up. Before we close and we go to the drinks, I can maybe some of our students or people who attended today for this convention, they have some questions of curiosity. Do you? I see you nodding. Maybe you were talking.
Okay. Anyway, thank you for all. It's very abrupt. Yeah, I found that it's a quite interesting topic, and it's very much associated with us. We are very much into playfulness and education, and question. I'm trying to come up with some
or reflection.
Okay. I guess from my perspective, perhaps it's a little bit too shallow. I guess to open up to the possibility to be playful is also open up to the sense of virtuality, like the possibility that can embrace the future. And I resonated very much when we discussed when we are talking about the digital and the digital turn, like how and the design, in particular in the digital age. That's just now I'm saying something with my gut feeling. It's like what play is, from my perspective, very much like nature things, and we engage with the world in that is the playful, the process of play is very much like a multi-dimensional sensory motor feelings and experiencing, but somehow during our growing up, some of those kind of sense so also be cut out and by distracting, by overemphasizing on different other dimensions. But I guess that is how digital getting more like attractive, more powerful to mask our other sensation, I guess. And that makes me feel more like urgency or the significance to bring those kind of sensation or sensual motor experience like into design education or design learning, and to encourage students to go out and to feel a little bit more about the world, and to re-emphasize the use of their other sensation, I would say. I guess perhaps that would be some sort of some knowledge that I can take from this knowledge share, the presentation that we had today, and perhaps the details are supposed to be further explored, like of course, but that's just my lesson learned if I want to. I don't know if it makes sense, but.
Thank you. Thank you. Maybe some other reflections or, please.
Do you think each design would be better if it includes an opportunity to play? Or do you think it's dependent on the function, for example?
Does play a role
in making a better design or a worse design?
I think that any design is a game. You devise the rules, and then you have to then somehow follow them. But you make always an attempt at establishing some form of order, which is tangible and intangible, like regime of dynamics, and then it's physical, let's say, grounding into space. And so I would say that designing is playing. They're the same thing, I would say.
Perhaps I continue and I say living is playing.
Living is playing.
I think the play has to have some meaning to it. It can't just be, whatever. And that meaning, I think, marries it to the function. So I think, it works well together, I think.
Okay. Any other reflection from our? Yes, please.
I have a question that's a bit more theoretical, so sort of on the surface. And I've been thinking a lot about these two aspects of play. The working. And there are two poles of play. The one would be that which is trying to solve something, the more structured game aspect of play. But then the part of play that is more a creative expression and that isn't trying to change the world. And two very sort of influential theorists on play, Johan Huizinga and Roger Caroua, they both said that play doesn't try to change the world. So then how do we sort of rethink of play if sort of we're trying to use it as a way to solve problems? And as one of the comments earlier was, what do you think of sort of leaving children up to solve the mistakes of their forefathers? What about children having the space for true creativity where it's not a means to an end? I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah.
Who wants to be first on this topic? Well, sometimes I agree, but especially as designers, I would say we like to play, and sometimes this play can be without a purpose. At the very beginning of the conference, there was the difference of play and a game, and a play does have this etymological root of a dance. Why do you do the dance? Why do you pray? Why do you go into the environment to be plenty of this kind of cosmic energies? Is there a meaning? Yeah, probably there is. Sometimes we don't really understand it, but there is. So play does have exactly this function, which is not to have a purpose, but just for the sake of playing. So yes, I don't know if somebody else wants to add some other opinions. So we end here. We do have some drinks. I would like to thank you, Belinda, Tato, Valeria, Perna, for being with us, Marguerite Dijon, Alison Koss, Roberto Pasino, who got asked to leave. I want to thank the photographer, who is not a photographer, but is a teacher here. And thank you for being really with us, and Siguela as well, but I don't see her anymore. So let's have a drink together, and let's play together in the coming months. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.